Ready.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the May 4th, 2023 meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you'll find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at accgov.com/planning. For those of you attending in person, on a table by the door, you'll find a sign-in sheet and copies of tonight's agenda. For each agenda item, we will begin with a report from ACC planning staff. This is followed by a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes. We will then hear from members of the public. 3 minutes are allowed for any member of the public who wishes to address the commission. In addressing the commission, please provide your name, address, and the nature of your interest in the project. Direct your comment to the planning commission and not to the applicants. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants or members of the public at the podium. Written correspondence received by noon yesterday has been forwarded to the commission and is part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the 3-minute time limit. For all speakers, please pay attention to the timing device near the projector screen. The device will display a yellow warning light when you have 30 seconds left and then a red light when your time is up. After the public comment period, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. After that, the applicant will take their seat in the audience. At this point, the public portion for this agenda item is closed, and the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss the item. We'll receive no additional public or applicant comments unless requested by a commissioner. Finally, please note that the microphones in this room are sensitive and that it's being broadcast live. Please turn off or silence your cell phones. Okay, so we'll start with the first item under general business, which is introduction of staff reports and other documents.
So move. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. And the approval of the April 6, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Great. Is there any May courts review or public comment?
No report.
Okay, great. We'll start right in with our first item under new business, which is 540 Baxter Street, and we'll start with a staff report.
Good evening, planning commissioners and guests and attendees. My name is Stephen Jaques, and I'm presenting the staff presentation for 540 Baxter Street. The applicant has requested to amend a commercial general plan development for the purpose of adapting an existing office building for a fraternity use. This fraternity would have the capacity to house up to 18 residents, but the applicant is proposing to keep the existing architecture and site conditions basically as is. With the exception of a few waivers, they have requested a waiver to reduce the total tree canopy coverage standard from 40% to about 30%. They've requested to eliminate the street tree requirement, and they've asked to reduce the required parking space count from 59 to the existing 35 spaces that are there on site. Staff opposes the first two conditions and supports the third one. This is the site. As you can see from the aerial here, we have the street running through the center is Baxter. Orientation purposes, on the right, you can see the dormitories for the students, and the university's property comes out to here. And then on the far left is Millage Avenue. And then this street here running along the back of the fraternity is Henderson Avenue with its historic houses. The future land use designates this as Main Street business, and the applicant is proposing to keep it that way. Their use is allowed within the Main Street business, and the same goes for their code. It is CGPD, and they're proposing to keep it that way. You may notice that we have a variety of zoning codes and therefore uses on the map in this area. You can see CG along Baxter, up and down Baxter here. You can see G where the university campus is. We have several different residential zones, especially up here. And then along Millage, it is CO. Those crosshatched areas are the properties that are members of the historic districts in the area. This property is not part of the historic district. This is the building as is, and basically as it's proposed to be. It would not change from what you see here. What you may notice is that we've got a juniper bank there along the street. This is where the applicant is proposing not to put, they want the waiver on street trees. Staff contends, as you may see out there on a sunny day, it's quite hot, and street trees would add a level of comfort to folks who are walking from there to campus and beyond. And since multimodal transportation is an important part of the advantage of this site, creating a sidewalk that's very comfortable for folks to use is why we don't support the waiver on the street trees. And by planting street trees, they can pretty much get close or accomplish the total canopy coverage that they asked for on the first waiver. So we don't support the waivers. We don't really think the applicant needs those. And there's really no, there are some benefits to following the code here that staff would like to see. This is the back of the property. Again, largely going to remain unchanged. Towards the left is the property backing up to Henderson. You can see there's an evergreen, thick evergreen plantings there. If you get up close, this is what the buffer looks like. And you can see there's a fence on the back property line, and then there's these Leland cypresses there. So when we're talking about impacts on adjacent properties, this buffer is here for reference. This is the site plan. It should look familiar because it's basically what's out there right now. Our analysis would say that the project is consistent with the 2018 comprehensive plan, specifically in that our plan favors adaptive reuse of existing buildings. Not only is that good for the environment, but it also, in this case, preserves a quality piece of architecture. They've gone above and beyond what we typically see to create a nice building here. The plan also favors infill on existing infrastructure. We'd much rather see folks make use of existing buildings and existing public services rather than having a new building with new infrastructure. That's great for the bottom line of the community. And also the plan strongly favors putting people close to their daily destinations. In this case, we have a student use and student activities being placed close to the campus. The application is also consistent with our future land use and zoning maps. They don't need to change those. Fraternities are special uses in our code, and we have criteria for evaluating whether those special uses make sense. For those who are unfamiliar with special uses, we designate certain types of uses, such as fraternities, as special because they could fit in the neighborhood, but they have some unique qualities and potential negative externalities that need to be considered first. So what did we consider in this case? Staff basically sees that putting students and student activities close to campus and close to other similar student activities, there's a lot of Greek life nearby along Millage, is logical, aligns with our comprehensive plan, and reflects a proven city planning principle of putting people close to their daily destinations. This particular site is on a commercial street, Baxter, in an active neighborhood with a mix of commercial, residential, and student uses in the area. And it's been that way for quite some time. In contrast, it's not the quiet end of a residential cul-de-sac. Therefore, the potential disruptive impact of fraternity events, noise, etc., in an active neighborhood that already has longstanding similar uses is reduced, especially compared to placing it in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood. So there are attractive qualities about both types of the active mixed use neighborhood and the quiet residential neighborhood, but those neighborhoods work based on two different sets of expectations. A fraternity on this site meets the expectations that come with an active mixed use neighborhood that is close to campus. And that's why we generally support this request, and we would ask that the Planning Commission consider whether that analysis makes sense or not. That said, we are recommending approval with some conditions. We don't support waivers 1 and 2 because the applicant really hasn't demonstrated that they can't meet those. There are some benefits to meeting those. We do, however, support waiver 3 on the parking. They can't add more surface parking here on this site, and given its location close to campus where a lot of multimodal transportation options exist, we don't think that this site will need as much parking as our code would anticipate. The conditions are as follows. The applicant, the first condition is basically that the applicant will meet several code compliance issues that we found. They're fairly minor. And then the second one is basically phrasing how we would want the applicant to meet those tree requirements rather than get the waiver. So with that, the staff report is concluded.
Next, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening. I'm Brett Thurman. I live at 160 West Thompson Street, Bogart, Georgia, and David Matheny and I are representing Phi Kappa Tau fraternity. David and I will share this 10-minute time period. We're back again for you. Some of you may remember we came last year with a request that was temporary in nature. That request was, I think, turned into a permanent arrangement so that it could follow through the special use plan. But after discussions with the neighborhood and some of their objections over there, it felt like that it was not, it wasn't the kind of fight we wanted to be involved with. And we've acceded to a number of the demands of the neighborhood. I think we reached a generally agreeable condition there for the time being. This property is as good as it gets for location, building size, and existing infrastructure. Right across the street from UGA, we're right on the bus lines. We're very close to walk to North Campus and downtown. Phi Kappa Tau searched hard to find this property. They investigated locations on Broad Street, on Baxter Street, across from this location, as well as properties on Millage Avenue. The locations were either too small, too decrepit, or the owners had no real intention in selling the properties. This CG zone property is a prime location for the fraternity. They intend to be good neighbors, and Phi Kappa Tau alumni here will speak to that. Planning Department recommended approval with conditions, and I want to address these conditions. We'll certainly provide the required parking lot buffer per the code. We plan to move the handicap spaces anyway because they're too steep. They don't meet the ADA guidelines. So they have to be moved and put somewhere else that's less steep. We will meet the bike parking requirements. Based on 35 existing spaces, that's 7 bike parking spaces the code is 35 spaces divided by 20 times 4 bike parking per that number. So, and then round up. So I come up with 7 bike parking spaces, and we were proposing 10. And using a 59, which is the assembly spaces that would be required for fraternity, that's 12 bike parking spaces, which we could also provide. We will agree with the street trees, and we'll put in enough sufficient to meet the total canopy requirements. I talked with the ACC forester the other day, and he talked about some ways that we could possibly do medium street trees instead of large street trees for this area. But I just put in 4 large street trees, we will meet the canopy requirements. We already meet the conserved canopy requirement for CG, and we will meet the total canopy requirements. So therefore, we agree with staff regarding the waivers. The only waiver we require is the parking count, which staff is recommending approval for. We can replace 8 compact spaces with 7 standard spaces for a total of 34 spaces. Now, there's additional 2 spaces in the rear in the patio that could be converted to more bike parking, motorcycle parking, other thing. And so in essence, we'll stand by our waiver for 35, but if you'd be willing to agree to or allow a waiver down to 32 spaces, that may make the property a little better for some of these alternative means of transportation. The rear fence is also very old and needs replacement. You know, we can only construct an 8-foot tall fence. Given the concerns for the neighbors, we're willing to take that fence down if we can get a waiver to build a fence up to 12 feet tall. And that's just something to consider. We did have one neighborhood meeting hosted by Peggy Gallus. The concerns mainly were noise and increased automobile traffic. At least that's what stood out to me from all the comments. The street already has permit parking, so there's no way people are parking on that street from students, fraternities, sororities, or whatever. They're not allowed there. The building is well-built with masonry veneer and non-operable windows. This will significantly reduce sound transmission from inside to outside. We do plan to add a small congregant area in the southeast corner, which is on the lower right side there, so that we can have an area to try and keep people from being in the back or on the side, closer to the residences. We want to move them to the front and toward Baxter Street. And so we believe that will help mitigate the noise, sound transmission back toward the neighborhood. We believe this is an excellent location for Phi Kappa Tau, and I'll ask David to come up.
Good evening. My name is David Matheny, and I live at 200 Mount Vernon Place. I am here tonight also representing Phi Kappa Tau as their architect. I'm not usually here before this body. Hopefully I can get through with the points that I'm trying to get through to. I have had various projects with this fraternity since 2005, and I'm here tonight to encourage this planning commission to make a recommendation to mayor and commission for approval to allow the Phi Kappa Tau fraternity to reside at 540 Baxter Street, also known as the Red and Black Building. I believe that this monumental building will be a very good fit for the Phi Taus. Obviously, you're going to hear from many of the residents of Henderson Avenue that will take exception to my opinion, but mainly they will discuss how having a fraternity that backs up to their street will be detrimental and that it is unfair for their street to be dealing with a fraternity. They feel targeted. However, I would say to you that this is not a unique situation for Henderson Avenue, but rather rather at many of residential streets and neighborhoods that border the university campus live with fraternities that adjoin their property. To name a few, East Rutherford Street, Woodlawn Avenue, Springdale Street, West Rutherford Street, Bloomfield Street, Harris Street, and Mount Vernon Place, just to name a few. Somehow these neighborhoods have figured out a way to coexist. Yes, many of the fraternities and sororities have been in their current locations since before many of the current residents. But there have been new fraternity and sorority houses built within the last 11 or 12 years that received variances and approvals to be built. One such sorority, Alpha Phi, with 350 members, was given permission in 2017 to renovate and build housing for 57 girls. The sorority also happens to adjoin a residence or two of Henderson Avenue. Now, I understand that in the minds of these Henderson Avenue residents, that there is a vast difference in sororities and fraternities when it comes to partying. But there is no difference when it comes to events that generate noise. And there's no difference when it comes to traffic. Yet I found very little evidence of protest to this new to campus sorority being located at 387 South Millage Avenue and adjoining Harris Street and property on Henderson Avenue. In fact, one of the current residents that is protesting Phi Kappa Tau works on an architectural firm that led the charge to get Alpha Phi sorority approved. I think it's wrong to villainize a fraternity for wanting to live in a building that is located on Baxter Street, which is well known to this community as a major commercial corridor leading to the heart of UGA. The residents of Henderson Avenue have known for years that this commercial general zone allows for all kinds of highly populated and busy commercial type businesses. I maintain that Phi Kappa Tau will be one of the least intrusive residents on Baxter Street. Will there be a football game day party? Yes. Will there be end of semester celebrations? Yes. Will there be will there be some traffic generated associated with an organization? Yes, but far less than the busy gas stations and restaurants that currently exist. Phi Kappa Tau is basically a residence hall for 17 students and one non-student property manager. By the way, Phi Tau is one of a couple of fraternities that has an adult manager living in the house. This is practically unheard of, and this is only one of the many differences that the particular fraternity possesses. Another is that this building is a major commercially built building and practically sound impenetrable, either from sound coming in or going out. And as my partners alluded to, the windows are fixed and would not allow for being opened for music and other sounds and noises coming from there.
Maybe we've got different lights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, now we'll move to the public comment section for this application. Is anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of the application? I think we do that first, and then we'll go to opposed. Okay, sorry.
My name is Bill Crane. I'm the president of Georgia Phi Kappa Tau Incorporated, a housing corporation nonprofit that's existed in Georgia since 1949. The residence you're seeing before you would be the 6th property we've occupied and the 3rd we've owned, assuming we close the transaction, which is our hope. These folks you're about to hear from, we would hope to be our neighbors. I know they have a different feeling on that, and you'll be hearing from them. As a Star Trek and Star Wars nerd, I say, may the 4th be with you. I'd like to believe there's a university community, and Athens is where I choose to retire myself, where we can all coexist together. And sometimes that means we have to do things we wouldn't normally do. And sometimes that means we have to listen and put other people's needs, wants, and desires ahead of our own. I hope in the 3 people we'll present over the course of this dialogue, you're going to get different points, not the same points repeated. But in addition to me, you'll be hearing from Officer Tim Clarke of the Athens-Clarke County Police Department, who's worked with us since 2010. His wife, Laurie Clarke, who helped reopen our meal plan at our prior residence. Justin Tardy, our chapter president, is over my right shoulder, who wants to share what kind of students they want to be and what kind of neighbors they want to be. I would reach out to you to say, we were at Hill Street in Cobham at our first location from 1949 to the mid 1950s. That property is still standing and in better stead than we left it. We were on Millage Avenue at what is the Sewell home, the primary residence of the initial dean of the Agricultural College from 1967 to 2005. I want to underscore, when the chapter was suspended, you'll hear of that later in 2005, it was our local alumni, not the University of Georgia, not the Interfraternity Council, that closed our chapter for poor performance in academics, dropping from the top 10 to the bottom 5 in recruitment numbers I won't even discuss, as well as bouncing checks all over town. We closed that chapter because of poor performance. I was the national president. We were heading into our centennial year. We sold that house to the ATOs who didn't want to return to the university campus in 2010. We took a eyesore derelict property at 558 West Broad Street, which was the abandoned Steak and Ale restaurant, later Red Rooster. Redeveloped that property, and I would say kicked off the renaissance you're now experiencing on West Broad Street. We went in before the game day condos. We went in before the Travelodge Hotel. We went in before Benson Hospitality, and all of that started with us turning around a rat-infested building that one of these folks was neighbors of. We did not have a single noise ordinance violation. You may hear later there was a complaint, which we're not aware of. We had one warning in 11 years at that property. We keep our yard clean. We had a dumpster. We won't at this property. We will be good neighbors. I would reserve the 2 minutes we have to respond at the end of the comment. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in favor of the application?
Hey, y'all. My name is Justin Tardy. I'm currently representing Phi Kappa Tau as the undergraduate president at 347 West Hancock Ave. I just wanted to speak a little bit today to give y'all a name and a face to associate with this school organization and to talk a little bit about who we are. Our main principles are learning, leading, and serving, and we strive to create men of distinction here at UGA. With learning, we have a GPA that's higher than the UGA men's average, and we strive to help each other out by studying together, pushing academics as a strong point. We have many leaders across campus, both in the Interfraternity Council and amongst different student organizations in the Terry College of Business in Franklin and other different societies there. We have many people that are within service organizations as well, mainly Shop with the Bulldog, partnering with the Athens-Clarke County School District, and we do other things to be able to help out our communities. And so I say all that to say that we are more than just, the stereotypical fraternity. Like a lot of stuff you're going to hear today is concerned about partying and all that kind of stuff. But This house serves exactly the need it serves exactly the needs that we need as a fraternity, gives us a place to gather as brothers, gives us a place to study, just to be able to share in the fellowship that we need. I saw some opposition that we would be disserviced as a fraternity here by not being able to have an outdoor band party or something like that, but nothing could be farther than the truth. This is an ideal property for us, close to campus, many students be able to walk to it here. And as men of distinction, we serve not only to be good members of our community, but to serve that community as well. We host 4 annual roadside cleanups around Athens, usually around Strickland Ave, but we've moved around a little bit. And like I said earlier, we have a lot of partnerships with the Athens-Clarke County School District. So our intention here is to fully be the best neighbors we can be, and to be able to continue creating future leaders for many years to come. And I believe this property will allow us to do so. So thanks for listening to me, and I'll.
Justin, you make this point about the band parties again relative to not having, I don't think they have much to say.
Yeah, sure. That it's not a problem for us to not have a band party outside. Like if that's a major issue, like that is not going to create a property that is not suitable for us. If we need to maintain noise inside or something like that, this property would still greatly serve our needs if that's the case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak in favor of the application?
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Tim Clark, 125 Jasmine Trail here in Athens-Clarke County. My profession here is I'm currently a police officer. I've been a police officer here in this county since '97. And the way I come about knowing people or knowing about Phi is through Bill and Phil Ford. Phi Kappa. Doing my normal patrol. When I got hired back in '97, it was under Chief Lumpkin, and his philosophy and his idea was to bring back community policing to Athens-Clarke County. And what does that look like? It looks like establishing relationships, not only with the people, but the community itself, business owners. Doing my normal patrol, which was part of Broad Street, I actually met Bill and Phil Ford, who was considered I believe his title was the house man. While they was building this location, they were very open. They explained to me that there was going to be a fraternity house at that location. Very open, invited me to come in and actually take a look around inside that location. And I did. I took a tour. And I was like, man, fraternity house in this area? He's like, yeah, we're going to do great things. I'm going to have these boys out here involved in the community, engaged in the community. They're going to do what's right. And I got a call later on, said, hey, we're going to need somebody to do some security later on at night. If they were to have some type of event, I said, hey, I'll do it. You know, that's my thing. They would have 1 or 2 events and I would be there and monitor that. The guys were very respectful. The noise levels were always maintained, was always down. The events were always controlled. Matter of fact, they had more security than I think they should have had, but they actually had the security there. As a matter of fact, the people across the street at the hotel, and I was like, hey, you know, it's a hotel across the street. They would actually come out and actually just observe. And I was amazed. There were never any complaints and never any issues. But I say that to say this, the relationships were built. The guys were very respectful. They were very nice to be fraternity guys. I was like, whoa. But they were very, very outgoing. The more I got to know Phil, the more he became like family. This is the house man. And I just want to say this over the course of time. Phil got to know my family. He got to know my mom. My mom, he would always talk about how my mom loved ginger snaps or whatever, and we would always make a joke about it. But when my mom passed away, Phil actually made a trip down south and actually attended my mom's funeral, and that meant the world to me. Just so you guys know, that's what I value. I value those relationships. That's what I got from Phi Kappa was the relationships. And they've been here forever. I'm from South Georgia. I'm from Bainbridge, Georgia. And for somebody to show up from Phi Kappa to my mom's funeral, you know, this is year 2. And I appreciate that. Just want to say thank you guys.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Is anyone else here to speak in favor?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Lori Clark. I live at 125 Jasmine Trail. I am the spouse to Officer Clark, who just left from up here. My relationship with Phi Kappa Tau also started with Phil Ford. Kind of hard to imagine Phi Kappa without him because, in my opinion, he is what this fraternity puts out. He is a man that is a wonderful friend, a guider. He makes sure that the kids under him, just as Bill Crane does, are doing what's right. There's never been one time that I've heard them acknowledge that one of their guys did something wrong and did not automatically attest it, did not automatically take a stand on it. The people who oversee this fraternity, you couldn't get a better group, honestly. And quite frankly, out of everyone in this room, about 87% of the people in this room at some point has had a tie to UGA. This is what we do. We support the people who go to school at UGA, because without that fraternity, without that school, Athens crumbles. They're just asking to be someplace that they can call home. I don't think that they will invade their neighbors behind them. Honestly, I think if they got to know them well, they'd find out that they'd have a lot more helping hands in their neighborhood as opposed to intrusions. I firmly believe that if they give them half a chance, they'll see the young men that are coming out of this fraternity. They're amazing guys. They turn into amazing fathers, amazing business owners who tend to not want to leave Athens even after they've graduated. If they do, they end up coming back later when their kids go to school here. This is the kind of support that Athens-Clarke County has to continue to give these students. They're not asking for anything unreasonable, I don't think, but then again, I don't live over there. I just think that this would be a prime location for them. It is closer to the campus as opposed to where they were before. It does make life easier for both them and the people who live outside of the area. Because to have the college kids closer to campus just creates so much easier of a transport, whether it's late at night, early in the morning, and to see kids walking down the street trying to get back to their dorm in the middle of the night as a part-time Uber driver, it almost breaks my heart. It scares me. So I have to pull over and say, hey, no, get in the car. But I don't have money for an Uber. It's okay. If they are closer to campus, that's one less thing we have to worry about. They might not be our kids, but they are our kids. As long as they're in Athens-Clarke County, they are our kids.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, and there's someone over there who wishes to speak in favor. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Patrick Flynn. I'm the current vice president of Phi Kappa Tau, the not so tall counterpart. Yes, I understand. We understand the concerns that might be voiced in a little bit. With fraternities, we understand the whole stigma around fraternities. And when you think of these stereotypical fraternity, you think of the ones with around 150 to 200 members that make all the noise and have all the complaints against them. Going into the fall, our number of active brothers will be around 50 to 60. So any sort of risk for noise or trash or traffic will be severely reduced. Going off of that, we have a great understanding that this community, Athens, has given us so much at our time here at UGA. We understand that we are undergrad students here, but something we are very aware of is that while we are just here for about 4 years, through our school life, we understand that this community is home to a lot of different people, and all we want to do is make sure to respect that. And if we are able to get this property, we would do all we can to make sure this community is respected, and we would give back in so many ways. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? Okay, is anyone here to speak in opposition to the application?
Now I get my turn. Good evening. My name is George Daly. June Bowl and I live at 145 Henderson Avenue. We strongly oppose having the fraternity in our backyard. It will especially make life difficult for our next door neighbors. Rhonda Packer, who will speak next, and Joan Jackson and Ken Jarrett, who have just built a bedroom on the back of their house to escape the noise from the Greek life on Village Avenue. Putting another fraternity in our backyards will make our homes close to uninhabitable. Fraternities make noise. It's in their DNA. They all do it. We cannot stand many more boom boxes outside, cutout mufflers, outdoor rallies with amplified microphones. This particular fraternity does not come with a good reputation. In the past 18 years, their charter has been suspended for over 25% of the time. Most recently, it was suspended in 2017 for a serious hazing incident. After it started back, one of its members ran a large Ponzi scheme from the fraternity house for over a year, for which he is now in the federal prison. The fraternity could have stayed on West Broad Street, but it chose to sell its property there for $4 million. Matt wants to move into our backyard, next to a long-established residential and historic neighborhood. Please don't let it do so. A bit later, you will hear about the problems Henderson Avenue has with noise from the fraternities and sororities on Millage, and with rats and dumpster noise from the restaurants at 700 Baxter, which is 2 doors down from the Red and Black building. We understand that Phi Kappa Tau is not the cause of these problems. This evidence is nevertheless very relevant to your decision because the code provides that you should consider the impact of fraternities on the character of the neighborhood. We will show that these problems have already put Henderson Avenue and its historic district under great stress, and a new fraternity on Baxter Street may well tip our neighborhood into irrevocable decline. Historic neighborhoods need to be protected, and we were here first. It is not fraternities that make Athens an attractive place for people to move. Thank you.
Who would like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Rhonda Packer. My husband Ken and I have lived at 127 Henderson Avenue for almost 40 years. Many years ago, the property behind our home was purchased and developed by the Red and Black, and they were wonderful neighbors. When we moved to Henderson Avenue, we realized that 6 weekends out of the year, we would experience the excitement and chaos of football Saturdays. However, we never imagined a fraternity house in our backyard. While we now experience 6 weekends a year, we are at risk of experiencing routinely. I want to share with you the personal impact that noise will have on my family. 9 years ago, my husband Ken had a massive stroke. It destroyed the right side of his brain. He is paralyzed on the left side, and he has no executive decision-making function. He can no longer read, punch numbers into a cell phone to make a call, use a remote to turn the television, or turn on a lamp. All of the daily road activities that most of us in this room take for granted. And I want to introduce you to my best friend and his best friend, Alexa. Are most of you familiar with Alexa? Could I see if you are? Okay. Those of you who are familiar realize that you can link a lot of things to Alexa, and that's what we've done. Even though Ken's voice is often weak, through Alexa, he is able to have some sense of independence and self-dignity by using voice-activated commands to listen to books and podcasts, change a TV channel, turn his lights on and off, call me on my cell phone, and contact 911 if ever needed. Activities that he chooses to do. If the TV volume is too loud, Alexa cannot hear his weak voice. His bedroom is on the back of our house, closest to the red and black building. I fear that the fraternity noise may prevent Alexa from hearing him when he has an emergency. While I am Ken's primary caregiver, my neighbors across the street are at the ready when I need their help. Diana, Rhett, Carl, Barbara, Slavka, and Ed. Henderson Avenue is not just 16 houses in a historical district.
Sorry to interrupt you, but we've got your red light. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Peggy?
My name is Peggy Gallus. I live at 277 Henderson Avenue, and I've lived there for more than 50 years. Henderson Avenue is the sweetest street in Athens. And the things that Rhonda said are so true for everybody on our street. We live within a block and a half of more than 6 sororities and at least 4 fraternities. Most of us have moved to the bedroom as far as we can from any of them. Sometimes the front room, sometimes the back room, always looking for the quietest spot. The high-powered blowers, you know about those, the dumpsters and the trucks that pick them up. And sometimes the dumpster is banged 4, 5, or 6 times to clean it. Rollaways, which rumble through the parking lots, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. The huge 18-wheelers that deliver their food and supplies to the fraternities and sororities. Cisco, US Foods, you've seen those trucks, but perhaps you haven't heard the air brakes. The back door is thrown open and banged against the side of the trucks, the 12 to 15-foot metal ramps thrown from the bed of the trucks to the concrete block street below so that they can unload. These are noises you don't think about and perhaps can't imagine, but these are daily events for us. Then there are the noises you do know about. The music played night and day, the parties, the screaming. And the music is played whether there are parties or not. The games, front yard football, cornhole, the hooping and hollering. All of this will be just feet from the back bedrooms of Ken and Rhonda Packer, George and June, and the brand new back bedroom that David Matheny designed for Ken and Joan. And they've just added to their house so that they could enjoy their quiet and beautiful backyard. Now, I'm not saying that the music and the noise and the carrying on are wrong things for fraternities to do. I'm saying that this is a wrong place for a fraternity to be. When David Matheny named the streets that have fraternities and sororities in the front of them, what he didn't mention was they don't have one behind them too. Our neighborhood needs your help. Please don't let this happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Rhett Jackson. I live at 150 Henderson Avenue. I'm one of the 7 current or retired professors, UGA professors who live on Henderson Avenue. There's a reason that most colleges and college towns have a fraternity row. Fraternities, by their nature, create issues with noise, traffic, trash, and occasional rowdy behavior. The benefit of having a fraternity row is that people can make real estate choices based on the prior knowledge of proximity to fraternities. When a fraternity is sited outside a fraternity row and within or adjacent to a residential neighborhood, the existing residents experience an unexpected reduction in quality of life to the detriment of their real estate value. The red and black building is tall and is located on the highest spot of Old Athens. It is the prior site of 2 water towers due to its height. 4 of the houses on Henderson share property lines and corners with the red and black property, and the structures are within 200 feet of the building. 3 of these houses are within 150 feet of the red and black building. Given that the building has no grass lawns for playing sports or drinking games or dancing, we can expect that many social gatherings will take place in the parking lot, which is even closer to the houses of Henderson Avenue. By comparison, the shortest house to fraternity distance is currently from the Birch House to the Sigma Phi Epsilon House at 540 feet, a much greater distance. But even at that distance, we are frequently kept away by loud music from the Sigma Phi Epsilon and Delta Sigma Theta houses. By allowing a fraternity to reside in the red and black building, the city would essentially be signing all of Henderson Avenue up for membership in the social functions of Phi Kappa Tau. This is not a membership we seek or desire. Several of our residents think the fraternity would change Henderson Avenue from being both charming and problematic to just being problematic, and they are considering moving. All of us will experience diminished quality of life and property values. Henderson Avenue has been a family street for over 100 years. In my 26 years on the street, 19 children have grown up on the street. We currently have an infant, a toddler, and a middle schooler on the street. Henderson Avenue is one of 14 residential historic districts in Athens, and we regularly encounter tourists walking and driving our street to see the well-kept historic houses. All of that is in jeopardy. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Gary Birch. My wife, Jonah, I live on 228 Henderson Avenue. I appreciate the discussion tonight, but it's been focusing primarily on this group of boys and these overseers and the next 4 or 5, maybe even 10 years. But we're talking about a long-term decision that will have a long-term impact on a historic neighborhood made up of families. And the discussion the last few years on our street is that we find this encroaching movement. Some people say we're under assault. I mean, we don't want to overstate the case, but things are changing. This is a historic neighborhood. It's really special. We love living there, but we don't want to see this trend continue. We have codes to protect the interests of neighborhoods like this. And my observation is that there are too many variances. There are too many changes that are being made, and there's poor implementation in some cases in the city. So I have great respect for these boys. I love students. My wife and I love students. But we also love our neighborhood. And there just has to be a better way to do this. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jenny Comstock. I live at 287 Henderson Avenue. And I'm one of those neighbors who feel like we are at a breaking point in our survival as a neighborhood. Various factions of the city have irreparably failed Henderson Avenue in recent years. I don't believe it's intentional, but make no doubt about it. If you vote to support this fraternity moving to 540 Baxter, you will certainly be at fault for the decimation of our neighborhood. It should come as no surprise to you that if you search Google or Alexa and ask what makes Athens special, one of the first sentences you'll see is that many words can be used to describe Athens. Vibrant, picturesque, but most importantly, unique. Until recently, Henderson Avenue has been all of these things. Unfortunately, due to the city's poor enforcement of their own codes and lack of oversight, that has rapidly changed. The majority of our homes were built in the late 1800s, well before commercial development along Baxter and Millage. Now Henderson Avenue has become a heavily congested road being assaulted on all sides by commercial and multifamily development. Last year, the city allowed the redevelopment of 700 Baxter with no enforcement of current code. The city claimed that 700 Baxter was grandfathered in. The code says that any commercial property abutting a residential district shall be required to erect a 6-foot opaque wall. That code was not enforced. The code says that a commercial dumpster shall be placed a minimum of 10 feet from a property line. That code was not enforced. The code also says that there should be a 6-foot green buffer between a residential property and any commercial dumpsters. That code was not enforced. As a result, I personally have 2 commercial dumpsters sitting 4 feet from my property line with no buffer. My home was built in 1886. As is similar to many others on Henderson Avenue, our properties are the ones that should be grandfathered in. But now I and five other neighbors have the commercial traffic from 700 Baxter giving us offensive odors, rodent infestations, noises, bright lights, inundating us day and night. Add a fraternity to the mix, and it's the nail in the coffin. Another example of the city's negligence, and it pertains because it's a big picture and just the welfare of our historic neighborhood, is the fact that the city completely has overlooked the one absentee owner on our street, completely demolishing the interior of his house, completely removing chimneys from the exterior of his house in a historic neighborhood with no initial restraint, no initial consequence from the city. These are unintentional consequences. We understand the city does not have the manpower to oversee everything that's occurring, but that's all the more reason you cannot vote yes on 540 Baxter. The city cannot regulate the unintended side effects that will occur under the lack of oversight. Couple the offenses already mentioned with our struggles for traffic mitigation despite meeting requirements, and we feel as though the city is failing us time and again. Please don't fail us now. Very much.
And still friends, right? Good evening. Gabe Comstock, 287 Henderson Avenue. I'm a dumpster house that my wife just spoke about. As an architect and a partner at a firm in Athens, I want to discuss the zoning or the comprehensive plan and my hopes and dreams for our city. Ultimately, I would like to believe that what most of us want is quality design focused on projects that benefit our communities. The current code does not always promote that. It can turn into checking boxes, looking for loopholes, and the path of least resistance. Our firm was responsible for the Alpha B project that David mentioned. We have had some issues with that project. That my neighbors they actually haven't pointed out, but I thought they would. But this is an excellent example of the neighborhood taking the burden of policing the projects after they are complete. What I'd like to believe is what made that project work was developing a design that was compatible with the context and working with the neighbors. As a firm, we went as far as finessing every single tree that was in the buffer with the adjoining neighbors and building a beautiful brick masonry wall. So when we look at this proposal that has a totally different set of requirements, even though it adjoins the same street, we must ask ourselves, is this what we want for Athens and Henderson Avenue Historic District? Another project on Baxter that treats our neighborhood
like a service corridor for trash and delivery trucks. Honestly, when I look at the code, it scares the hell out of me. Correct me if I'm wrong, you could build 65 feet tall, 50% commercial, if you had 50% commercial on the ground floor, 1.5 FAR, all that in a CG zoning. This is not compatible with our community. Can you see the contradictions in the zoning code and the HPC guidelines? Two streets, two sets of rules that don't work together. Building on Baxter, not even considered non-contributing. If this is approved, this project is just a bad precursor to the future of our neighborhood. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big proponent of density and walkable commercial hubs, but they should be compatible and well thought out, especially when paralleling an RS8 historic district. Projects should not be grandfathered in, thus accepting the poor decisions of our past. Every project should have the highest expectations to meet guidelines that promote good design. Can you imagine 65-foot student housing looming over Henderson Avenue? Fortunately, this project isn't 65 feet tall, but it will have a commercial kitchen with a grease trap, which means clean out food deliveries, lots of decomposing refuge on top of what we already deal with, kitchen exhaust, more stench, more noise. None of this is mentioned or noted in the site plan. We also have more of this than we can handle with the current 700 Baxter redevelopment. I'm begging you to not support this project, and let's work together to promote good design in Athens. Let's recraft the codes so that they promote thoughtful zoning decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening. My name is Joan Jackson. My husband Ken Jarrett and I live at 195 Henderson Avenue. I share the concerns that you've just heard from many of my neighbors on Henderson Avenue, so I won't repeat all of those. I wanted to speak because my husband and I are unique among the neighbors in having had prior experience living near this particular fraternity that's in question tonight. We lived on Deering Street previously, approximately 500 feet as the crow flies from the Phi Kappa house on Broad Street. We did hear a noise, loud noise, very loud noise. And my husband went down, made sure that was the source of the noise. We heard it repeatedly, and we were not able to get any assistance from the city in enforcing the noise ordinance. So we're very concerned that that pattern of behavior is a pattern of behavior that might be repeated if this fraternity moves to Baxter Street. And therefore, we're asking that you not approve this project. Thank you.
I think I'm the last one, okay?
You got
All right. What?
We got one more.
One more?
Go ahead. Doesn't matter.
I'm letting you, sure.
You go first, Jake.
Yeah, you probably have closing remarks. I wasn't gonna talk, but then other people did, and I want to say a couple things. I'm Jason Bennett. I am the third generation living at 196 Henderson Avenue. So it's a very personal street to my family and my experience in Athens. We're here advocating strongly for the character of our neighborhood because you literally are the only people who can protect it. We've seen an acceleration in the lack of protection of Henderson Avenue. We now have a party house on one end of the street that's already been discussed. The owners willfully and maliciously violated the codes of Athens-Clarke County, and a new sorority now is on the other end. UGA President Jay Moorhead actually owned a house that bordered that sorority, and when that was approved, he sold the house. Athens-Clarke County does not owe fraternal organizations any deference or special consideration. Housing for students and student organizations is a problem for the university to solve, not Athens-Clarke County, not giving in to variance and code changes and invading, next to neighborhoods. You don't owe these organizations anything. I was a member of one. I worked for my fraternity as a traveling consultant after. I have advocated for membership in fraternities. I don't know these guys. They sound great, especially when you restart. They pick the best guys. My concern is, who's going to keep that promise going 10, 20, 30 years from now, generations from now? What happens if you approve and they move in and they're wonderful neighbors and then they leave and find another property or have financial problems? The next fraternity that moves in, are they going to pick up the same wonderful flag and promises that these guys are promising? No way to know.
David mentioned Alpha Phi, the sorority that was approved, that the president ran away from. That it's a sorority. People think they have better behavior. They probably typically do. They don't have parties in their houses, et cetera. But my house corner borders them, and they made all these promises that the commission approved and said, okay, you made these promises, we'll let you do it. They wouldn't turn down our street. They wouldn't use the Henderson Harris corner turn, which is where I live. The problem is, I don't think they lied. Best, they had good intentions, but they don't control their vendors. They've driven over my property. There's damage on my backyard and my Laripe. If you look at the corner, some service truck drove up 5 feet up on the embankment, destroying it, and 30 feet long to make that turn. They're not even supposed to be using that corner. They can promise all they want. This is a sorority. They're supposed to be better. My property is damaged, and I got to take that up with somebody at some point. That's Alpha, that's that sorority. They promised wonderful things. They got put in, and now my property is being literally damaged, not just noise, but literally being driven over, and there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So if it's approved, even so, I would feel better if I had the cell phone numbers of the local adult fraternity advisors who I can call at 2 a.m. if there's a problem, and who will stand behind these promises for as long as Phi Kappa Tau is there. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Again, I work for my fraternity. I understand that there can be wonderful behavior and contributions by fraternities. But if they're going to be there, I would want some personal accountability from the adults who are going to be there for years after the students are gone. Thank you for your time.
Here's our contact.
Thank you.
That's a great performance. Thank you.
So my name's Diana Jackson. I live at 150 Henderson Avenue. And I'd like to speak, I guess, a little bit on this and close out for our street. So under the amendment of the plan development, the architect writes that under the site characteristics that the fraternity plans to add a 294 square foot concrete slab, right there where they're going to congregate. The plans show no retaining wall or any details of such slab. It's unclear how the slab can be added and maintain the slope without one. They don't tell you anything about it. The amendment also refers to an existing black iron fence that will be extended, yet the drawings make no such reference to it and they don't show anything about it. On C100, the property information states that the site drains to an unnamed tributary of the North Oconee River. That drawing fails to mention that the site drains to Tanyard Creek. Tanyard Creek is a creek listed on the 303D listed street as impaired by EPD. ACC has a watershed management plan for Tanyard Creek that identifies best management practices such as extended detention or parking area retrofits, yet none of these are offered. Under the tree management plan and planting, although they said they would do this, they were requesting a variance because they cannot install the required canopy cover. They write that the slope ends at the back of the Baxter sidewalk and the fraternity wishes to minimize disturbance to that slope. Trees are known as slope stabilizers and only will help with its stability. How do you add a concrete slab but not add a tree? So under 9-21-3A4, the code talks about the benefits of granting the variance. I wonder how one determines what those benefits are, and if granting the variance outweighs the negative impacts, such as noise, traffic, decreased property values, that those variances have on our quaint historic neighborhood. Under 920-5C25A, the traffic generated, the generation of noise and impacts on the character of our neighborhood would all be negative from the fraternity. My son lives at Finley Street, which is just up the hill from where their old place was. On a daily basis, he said that fraternity played amplified noise every day from 4 to 10. He could hear it within his apartment. And, you know, the fraternities that are there right now, I have to often sleep with a fan at night just to block out the noise. The other night, I'm deaf in one ear. I put the good ear in the pillow. I could still feel the bass rumbling through the pillow. So lastly, I guess I'm going to ask you to, that the amendment that they're seeking is allowed, they're saying it's an allowed use within the CG. That's misleading at best because it's an allowed use subject to the approval under the special uses procedure, which requires mayor and commission approval. We ask you to deny these variances and save Henderson Historic District from yet one more assault. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, the applicant has 2 minutes to speak if they wish.
Hi, Bill Crane again. First, we would like to be your neighbors. Second, when we had a neighborhood meeting generously hosted by Peggy Gallus, I noted several members of Alpha Phi and Gamma Phi Beta walking up and down the street, returning to their sorority houses. And several knew Miss Peggy well enough to know to say, Hey, Miss Peggy, I don't know if they're good neighbors or bad neighbors, but they seem to be trying to work their way in. The Wilkins house, which is the Alpha Z house, was about to fall in before that organization rescued that mansion. We've been involved in the preservation and saving of 2 historic structures, including the one we are currently leasing at 347 West Hancock. I joined the Housing Corporation when I was Patrick's age. I'm now in my 42nd year of consecutive service. I have no plans to leave the board. Some of our board would like to see me retire. I'm not going anywhere. My contact information, and we will also have an adult living on property for this staff and for everyone here. Got business cards from anyone who wants them. My mobile number, and I've gotten those calls at 2 a.m. It's 404-964-5609. June Ball, who didn't speak tonight, who is Mr. Daly's companion, was one of the neighbors at 347 West Hancock in the Cobham district, who negotiated a agreement with our fraternity to continue to reside. We move out at the end of this academic year. June, just by a nod or not, did we follow through and honor the agreement? And you can say, you can come up if they'll let you. Did we honor, and when there were problems or concerns, did we?
Mr. Crane, I think you can't address them.
Okay, I'm sorry. She'd indicated she'd share that with you, and she didn't have that opportunity then, so I was trying to give it to her. We're men who honor our words and commitments. When we screw up, we'll take care of it. We closed our own chapter down, Mr. Daly, for 4 years because of poor performance, and not the university, not the IFC. In 2009, that's that 25% you were speaking. There are other points I'd speak to, but I don't have enough time. I hope that y'all will stick to the ordinance and code. Note that we don't have space for outdoor. There is no space for a turnaround truck. We will not have a serving kitchen or have need for a grease trap. You can't cash flow a meal plan off of 18 residents. We've been at this for a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we'll bring it behind the rail for planning commission discussion. Does anyone want to lead us off?
I'll jump in. And I guess I should preface this. I mean, so this red flag building was literally what brought my family to Athens. So this is not it's been something that's ever since I found out about this, it's been interesting. It's been a thought process in my mind. A couple questions for staff. So why is Baxter Zone commercial general?
That's what
Why is it? I mean, it's been zoned commercial general for the duration of the time that I've been here.
I mean, like, so since like the 90s when things were rezoned?
Probably at least back into the 70s or early 80s.
Is there like a thought process behind that as far as like what's around it and kind of, or is it more about like what is expected in terms of, was the university, proximity to the university, thinking there would be bigger things built there?
I've been here a long time, but I wasn't here then, so I don't know that I could answer that, but sure.
I've been here forever. Seriously, I mean, Baxter Street has been commercial from Lumpkin Street all the way out to Alps Road since I got here 50 years ago.
I get that, but just in terms of zoning.
But that's what it was.
So it's always been commercial general.
Well, I mean, we got zoning in 1964. All right?
Sure.
So probably starting then, but it was like that 50 years ago.
But so not necessarily, I guess I'm just saying, because you come up to millage and it turns into commercial office. So you have commercial office down millage. So another commercial zone versus commercial general. So that's all I'm getting at. It's just like, why is
they had different terms
right
way back, but it's always been commercial.
I get that. Yeah. I get that. It's just the idea that in commercial general, you can build a higher density than other commercial zones, right?
I mean, from a density standpoint, it gives you a little more lot coverage. It gives you a little bit more density from CN, which would be the next commercial zone down. The heights are the same.
And I guess
that's all you can build.
And I guess my only thought process in this is in general, like whenever I see neighborhoods backing up to commercial general, it kind of makes me bristle a little bit because I'm kind of like, what's going on here? What are the issues that are going to be coming up with potential development, commercial general, and residential neighborhoods? There's no buffer. So in this case, Henderson Avenue is the buffer. And
But at the same time, so like, here's my push and pull though, because it's like, I mean, I don't want to say a lot of historic neighborhoods, but I mean, this is what happens in historic neighborhoods when you have them in this downtown core area, and things just start getting built up and things get more dense. And so we have an older neighborhood that's being surrounded by development, and it's not compatible with the neighborhood, obviously, because it's newer, but this is also just kind of how development goes. I'm just sort of word salad, so don't mind me. Okay, another question I had just about noise ordinances, and I'm sorry, Brad, if you don't know this, it's totally fine. But I'm just wondering if you have a noise ordinance called to you, is there like a fine involved in that? Like, what is kind of the process, the noise ordinance violation?
Noise ordinances are handled through the police department.
Okay.
So in terms of, how they process them, I don't know that I'd be the best person to ask, but it's a police department function.
Yeah.
I can tell you it is punishable by a fine. I think they're preset under the ordinance.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't mean to kind of punt this around, because I'm curious to hear how other people feel about this. Is in general, I think having a fraternity or sorority in a commercial area is generally okay, because I think it's more compatible with that kind of surrounding. I definitely would want to see the trees replaced. I'm glad that there's no dumpster. Yeah, I'm torn. I mean, I live a few blocks from a fraternity. They have parties, I will say 11 o'clock, it's out, but I have also put a baby to sleep and heard bumping in the baby's room. So but it doesn't happen very often. So I don't know. This is my push and pull of like, how much is too much? Sorry.
I think I can actually make a pretty good segue from that, because I too, I've got a lot of push and pull on this issue as well. And so I think it'd probably be helpful for me to kind of lay out, how my brain is framing the problem here. I think the historical question of why we have CG here on the stretch of Baxter is an interesting one, but obviously not one that we can do anything about in any decision that we make. I haven't been around long enough to know the history of why this was a PD to become the red and black office. Probably did have, do you know, what was it working with the neighborhood behind it? So
it was, I can't tell you why the property prior to this PD was zoned the way it was, but it was when we used to have the old plan development reserved classification for certain properties that were deemed to be. We had one over on Oglethorpe that was PDR back in the day. We don't have that classification anymore, but it basically required the development of any properties designated that way to go through the PD process in order to be developed.
So at that point, the limitation of it being an office.
It was submitted as a PD specifically for an office, which restricts its use without an amendment from changing.
So if the special use weren't granted, then it would still have to be an office.
And this is not technically a special use. This is an amendment to the PD to allow another use.
But it feels like a special use, because it would be a special use if there weren't
In any other circumstances.
Yeah,
That's
so
correct.
if it were just plain old CG, we'd be going through a special use process. Okay. So that gets me, I think, to the thing that I'm chewing on right now. The reason why we have a special use process, and I actually was on the commission back when we put sorority and fraternity houses into that category, that, they have to be considered a special use in any commercials, well, pretty much anywhere, essentially, because we considered one downtown not long ago. Yeah, the same people. So we've got, we do have this special category in the way we analyze land use decisions that focuses on the use. And we talk a lot about form-based zoning. We like it a lot. There are times when the use does make the difference. The building's gonna look exactly the same from the outside with a few minor changes, but instead of being a newspaper office, it's going to be a fraternity house. So this is where I am this is where this is where I get kind of tangled up. If we don't grant this, or I should say it's the mayor commission don't grant it, but if we decide to recommend against it, what we're recommending against this particular use essentially the fraternity house. And then what could go in there would be at some kind of other office building. So therefore it probably wouldn't be a restaurant with lots of dump trucks and delivery vehicles and that kind of thing. So I can see why that puts us in this position of when we consider, you know, what else could go in there. It would be a less intensive use essentially than what is being requested. So the kind of segueing again with what Kristen was saying, I really am having a hard time separating the fact that this is appropriately zoned for us to be considering it. And it's very close proximity to the neighborhood just behind. So I want to hear what people have to say.
Yeah. So first, I want to start out by saying that I am incredibly sympathetic to the neighborhood concerns, and I'm very glad that people got together to speak about this. I think that it's good. The more people that we can have coming out to speak on their own behalf, within their own interest, the better. The more information that we have. I also think that if the idea of a fraternity were to be erased from history, and we were to look at it today and say, do we want to do this? I feel like 18 people whose frontal lobes have not fully developed yet, with a lot of access to alcohol, living under one roof with not inside of an institutional area, we would probably say that's generally a bad idea. So I do understand also why the neighbors would be concerned about this fraternity moving in, regardless of whether it was this fraternity or a different one. I also really grateful for folks coming to speak from the fraternity. Regardless of what fraternities are, it seems like y'all are trying to do good and be good neighbors and be good citizens. And I really love that. So the rest of what I'm going to say is going to completely ignore the specific fraternity that is here, because there's a lot of back and forth and it's not really relevant to my analysis and how I'm thinking about this. And I don't want to be like, oh, well, if this fraternity is good enough, if they prove themselves to be the good one, then they can do something, but yeah. So all of that aside, with fraternities being perhaps on average, not great neighbors, I'm willing to accept that contention as a basic fact. That being said, these are institutions that are not going anywhere. Unless I posed the idea at agenda setting. What if Athens-Clarke County were to make fraternities and sororities a special use that is only allowed in governmental districts, so that they could only be built on the University of Georgia's campus? And there is a general consensus among the experts in the room, including our legal expert, that would be really, really easily challenged and probably would not be enforceable or successful. So fraternities and sororities exist in a college town. They're not going anywhere. So that being said, even if all of the noise and trash and partying and traffic that the residents fear were to come to pass from this fraternity, even if that's even if we were to just say that's a certainty that these are going to be bad neighbors and they're going to be really loud. What happens if this application gets denied? What happens if the Mayor Commission says, okay, yeah, we are not approving this plan development amendment / special use? These folks are going to keep looking for a house. They're still going to want a place to live and socialize. They're going to hopefully eventually find a different property. They'll come back with the exact same with the exact same ask that they'd be allowed to use a house as a fraternity house. And let's just we also know that it's going to be in some sort of commercial district or mixed density district, at least, because this is not an allowed use in any single family residential area. And really, it's best that it stays pretty close to the university. So it's going to be in a neighborhood that has neighbors that are not fraternities. And so they come back, and maybe they have to do this a couple times. Maybe the next time they come back with a proposed property, all those neighbors come up and talk about how bad of a neighbor this fraternity is going to be, and how they do not want to be living near them. And then maybe the mayor and commission says, yeah, well, a lot of people really don't want this, so we're not going to allow this. And they keep coming back until they find a house in a neighborhood where the neighbors in that neighborhood have less time or energy or knowledge, institutional capacity to organize against that moving in. Maybe this is a neighborhood where the houses are less historic, where the houses are worth less. Almost certainly under these conditions, it's going to be a neighborhood where fewer people who live there are able to afford their own home. It's going to be a neighborhood with a lot of tenants. And then that's the neighborhood where the fraternity goes. It goes in the neighborhood with the less well-off people. And this is a historic in planning commissions just everywhere, a pattern that happens where the neighborhoods, usually the wealthier neighborhoods, the more stable neighborhoods are able to organize against bad things happening near them. And all of the bad things get dumped into the poorest neighborhoods, and the cycle continues. So that is not an equitable way to make land use decisions, and it's not an equitable way to allocate the nuisance risk that comes from fraternities. And so I want to put that out there. I think that staff has done a good assessment under the plan development standards and all the applicable codes to determine that this building, that this location is a good place for a fraternity, relatively speaking, as good as any place can be. And so I'm inclined to say, let's follow that and not follow how much concern is spoken out in an individual meeting. Furthermore, I want to lay this out. I believe the historic district ends at the historic district boundaries. This district is this is basically downtown or blocks from downtown. These neighborhoods get special designations so that they would not be subject to the general densification and intensification that happens in cities, which is where we are. And that protection cannot be allowed to extend vaguely in all directions from the boundaries of the historic district to create a pseudo-historic district in places where the people who own land there may not want to be a part of it. And the last thing I have to say is, reasonable amounts of noise and traffic and debris are to be expected when you live in a city, especially when you live in downtown or near a major university. Unreasonable amounts are the boundaries of the unreasonable amounts that is subject to government or civil enforcement. And I hear that y'all have not had good luck with government enforcement. And as a person who is regularly trying to get tenants healthy, stable housing and regularly going up against landlords who would rather save a few dollars than perform regular maintenance on rental properties, I very much understand how difficult it can be to get code enforcement to do anything, and how frustrating it is when it seems like the priorities of the government do not align with the priorities of the citizens. And to that, I just want to say, we've discussed noise ordinances are covered by the police. Other issues might be code enforcement. the mayor just published a recommended budget for 2024. It's over $30 million for the police budget. Significantly less than that for building inspection, which houses code enforcement. If you are asking why doesn't your police department prioritize the crime or law violations that affects you, I recommend going to the Public Safety Civilian Oversight Board, a board that was created recently to hold this department accountable. So if you feel like you are not being heard or not being listened to, there's a place to go for that. I mean, an additional one, in addition to calling the police department, calling your commissioner, and really calling for accountability in those departments. Which I hope to see. I hope to see the law treat y'all properly. I hope to see better enforcement of these codes, because I don't think that land use is the place to address them, but I do think they need to be addressed and that y'all deserve that. And in the meantime, there is civil enforcement. There are a lot of good tort lawyers in this town. And I'm pretty sure that Phi Kappa Tau knows that too, and they're keeping an eye on it.
Several of them are members.
Well, you have to find one of the ones that are not members. But
Sarah, I'm gonna.
that's it. That was it.
Anyone's jumping at the bit right now?
I'm going to call it chomping at the bit. But anyway, I think the crux of this, we need to get back to what this really is. And this is, the zoning request is to amend a CGP so that they can be allowed to have something besides office. I don't see why this building cannot be used as, or sold or rented as zone. Period. And with that, I'm going to recommend denial. That's a motion.
Anyone like to second that motion? So we have a motion and a second, and then we can have further discussion. Did you want to speak?
Yes, lots of, yeah, I'm also seeing lots of things to talk about on both sides of this issue. I think a lot of it comes down to noise. I think that is the quality of life that we expect from fraternities, the issue that we expect from fraternities. And I think the neighbors are quite right to worry about it. Let's see. So I think there's intermittent noise, which is different from parties. And I think that's especially hard to enforce and something that comes with fraternities. The shouting, the cars coming in and out at different times of the night, the games in the backyards. And then there are the actual parties where you have sustained noise. And I have close experience with people calling the police repeatedly on fraternities, and there not really being any enforcement and just repeated violations happening throughout the year. So I think this could be expected from pretty much any fraternity. And I do want to appreciate that all the character attestations that have happened to this particular fraternity, and I think it's great, all the community service and personal development. However, turnover is a fact of life for fraternities and their staff, and so unfortunately, our decision is just for any fraternity's use. It's a permanent decision, so I don't think the character of this particular fraternity is relevant right now. And fraternities in general, I'm going to just say they're really not necessary to the functioning of UGA or Athens. I don't see why, anyone deserves a chance, as someone said, given the documented quality of life impacts on neighborhoods. And I'm also going to go out on a limb and say that multi-generational neighborhoods do deserve some protection from the impacts of commercial and university-related uses. Just people who are sleeping at normal hours. I just don't see the compatibility with a fraternity right on directly adjacent. And I would love to delve into in another time this issue of when we do have the backs of multi-generational neighborhoods against the commercial general district, are our standards conducive to quality of life in terms of all the issues that were brought up about loading, traffic at different hours, deliveries, dumpsters, but that's for another time. So going back to noise, I think there's actually some potential for mitigation in this situation. I'm not an expert, but I think it was a real plus that the windows are not operable, that the population of the building will be low, that this gathering area is towards facing Baxter and not a neighborhood. I'm curious if the fence would make any difference, especially if it was solid, had mass to absorb sound. I can't answer those questions. So with that, I'm just gonna put both of those arguments on both sides. Someone else?
Can I follow real quick on the fence thing and then we'll do that? And Joey, I'm curious about the applicant spoke about the ability, their willingness to put a solid fence in the back of the property. Higher than what would be normally allowed, right? As a amendment to a PD process, can we require something like that that would normally not be allowed? Okay.
Just see what you would add a condition that would grant an additional waiver to the allowable height of a fence and require them to put in a fence that's X feet tall. Anything above 8 would require it. I would, if that were going to be discussed, I would assume that you would want to also add some materials and protection to the existing vegetation. So that, especially if you're looking at a masonry fence or something like that, required footings and other things to be put in, is it going to require those existing Leyland cypresses to be removed in order to do it?
Yeah, I guess like several of us, I've kind of struggled with this application because I completely understand the neighborhood's concerns. These seem like nice guys and responsible adults related to fraternity. So any concerns I think are not, at least in my mind, specific to this fraternity, but just, this is a place where on one side of the street, you have the University of Georgia dormitories. And so this is an ideal site for a fraternity. It's right across the street from the university, but on its back property line, you have a lovely historic neighborhood. So that's a rough transition, inevitably. On the other side, I think that, looking at the ordinance, the special use standards that is set out in 9-20-5 sub C, it says these are the considerations that the mayor and commission should consider. 8 out of 9 seem to point in favor of allowing this, similarity in scale, bulk, and coverage. They're not altering the exterior of the building. Architectural compatibility, the same, generation of noise, light, and glare is the one that seems to point the other way. And so when you have a special use process that defines criteria to be applied in making a decision, and an applicant meets 8 out of 9, I think, potentially the county, it's not our decision. I take some solace that our decision is only to make a recommendation. The mayor and commission will make a decision on this. And, it does strike me as that when you deny an applicant that meets the standards, you're asking for a lawsuit because it's difficult to say that you fairly applied the standard. So that's the concern in terms of denial in my mind. And I also was thinking about noise mitigation. I did want to ask you, right, you mentioned a masonry fence might be, I went out to the site today and I looked at it and looks like an 8-foot tall fence and it's on a 5-foot high embankment from the parking lot. And so it's about 13 feet above the pavement. Is a possible condition like a fence that's taller than that? Are there limits on what, not us, but the mayor could impose in terms of that sort of protection for the neighborhood?
No, you could, with a PD amendment, you could request a condition of including a waiver to build a taller fence and specify materials and other things. Where my concern would be is the compromise the existing vegetation in order to install a masonry fence that's 12 feet tall on the property line.
Right. Yeah, the cypresses seem to be about 10 feet off the fence, but just across the fence, there's a bunch of large trees that are right up on it. So yeah, I think that would be a concern. Yeah, as I say, I struggled with this and I can certainly see both sides. And I guess my inclination is to recommend denial with the knowledge that this is not a final decision. And I understand completely the reasons in the staff report for recommending the other way.
Joey?
So looking at this property, talking about impacts of fraternities to our community, I think they have a great impact to our community. Sororities, I think there are fraternities and sororities of all classifications, races, whatever. They're all over our community. They have great impacts to our community. So for someone to say the impact of the community, I think of the impact in the neighborhood is good. They get out and they serve and they work within the community. I also heard, and I look at this property being next to the university, I challenge how many people are sitting in this room because of the university. And granted, fraternities and sororities don't have to be here for the university, but there's probably 90% of Athens-Clarke County, or maybe the number's not that high, but within this room, the number is going to be great that are here because of the university and what the university offers. And offering different organizations for the students is a good thing for the students. It's a good thing for what they can do and where they can gather and where they can have their quality of life. I look at the relatively closeness to this street, which is a beautiful street. It's a beautiful street with historic, beautiful homes on it. I don't have $900 to $1 million to buy one of these homes. I don't have the property there because I know what houses sell in that neighborhood and the value of these homes. They're beautiful homes and they're great homes, but they're also homes right near a university, a major college town. And I look at this building and think that the proximity to the university is perfect. It's a perfect location for it. It would not demise Henderson Avenue and it would not affect property value at all by placing a frat there. Property value only be affected by the economy change up or down. I've seen that for 21 years here in real estate. I've seen property values go up and down, and not one time in my 21 years has someone ever called and said, how many feet is that from a fraternity house? How many feet is that from an apartment complex? I think the property value should be decreased because I'm that close. That's not in the realm. That's not in the business. Trust me, in all my years of the business and traveling, that has no impact on that. I do hear the residents, I do hear the people on Henderson Avenue, and I hear what they're saying. I hear what they're saying on the noise and the music. There comes a time where that's part of our campus. That's part of living here. Now, granted, midnight at night, that's a noise ordinance. And I know, I live where I live. I hear the train and I hear the train blow the whistle all the time. And I'd probably challenge that train whistle being louder than the noise ordinance, but that train has the right to blow that whistle and has the right to do that for public safety. And I'm not saying this is a right of public safety, but when we talk about public safety and we put this on the police department and then we don't have the funds or we don't have enough police to go out and monitor ordinances of this nature, I just can't blame these boys, and I can't blame fraternities and sororities in this town for noise ordinances. I didn't know we were going to have a motion so quick. I thought we would have more discussion before the motion came out, but I speak in favor of this. I like what the Athens-Clarke County has brought for us. I like the ordinances or the things that need to be looked at. If we do approve it, the conditions, I'm okay with all them. It feels like the fraternity is okay with that. That street, Baxter Street, has always been a commercial, like, you know, Lucy said, it's always been a commercial street, but because they wanted it to run parallel to Broad and they wanted to bring businesses over there, and it connects out to the University of Georgia. You know, that is what was intended on that street when they started doing it, is to put businesses up and down it. And the houses that were built there were probably, I would dare to say, were built to take advantage of the businesses in the university, and which was probably put there for walkability and things of that nature. So I think it's a great spot. I would be okay with even the 12-foot rear fence if that would be the commission so choose to add that there. But, you know, hearing a police officer speak and hearing a police officer say that, you know, he's attended their meetings and he's attended their functions, and he's never had any instances there. I would think if there was a noise complaint and there was an officer there, his radio would be the first one to go off that he had a noise complaint, and he would be the first ones to know. So I challenge some of that, and I accept and want to hear what the residents have to say. But I think we've got to step back and take a look and say, okay, this property with special use, I understand, but could be used for that. And there's only 3 variances that we were really looking at with the trees and a couple other things, and they all seem to be met. So I'm struggling with how people are going against what was brought forth with the approval with conditions, because I really think that this property is a great property for this. There are fraternities and sororities that are really close to a lot of these houses up and down Millage Avenue. And so I stand here in favor of this property, because I think that the last time they brought a property for us and we heard from the neighborhood and they said that the noise ordinance, but it was even further from homes. And you know, it seems as if there were no violations there at that time. So I think this is a great property for this, and the location with the university, walkability, what our community wants, what I hear all of y'all talk about nonstop when anyone comes about is density, walkability. How can this community be better? And we got a project in front of us, and now y'all are not on board with it. And I'm just wondering where we pick and choose on walkability in our community and how we want to make this better. So I stand to support the guys.
Two things. First, just I'm also generally in support of approval with conditions. And I think kind of getting in the middle of, and also maybe preempting some further conversation. I think that if we, if someone does make a motion for approval with conditions, that we not try to put the waiver of the minimum fence height into our recommendation, because we don't know about the vegetation. I don't think that we could, as a body, come up with a meaningful recommendation for that. And I'm sure that if I'm sure that the applicant is going to talk to Commissioner Wright, going to talk to the commissioners, and that could easily come up in a commission defined option without us having to work over wording. And then my second is I have a question for Commissioner Goodrum, because you used a phrase that I had never heard before, and I'd like more clarity. As a definition of neighborhood, what is a multi-generational neighborhood?
That's why I update to single family neighborhoods, because I don't believe in them. I mean, I don't think they're a good idea. I think they're exclusive. I guess multi-generational is in contrast to student dominated, because I really see when you have a critical mass of undergrads, you know, they're up at all hours. That's just part of student life, and it's great. But I don't think it's usually, I think it usually has quality of life implications for people who are going to jobs early in the morning or putting their kids to bed. That was my meaning.
Okay. Thank you. That makes a lot more sense now. Are there any neighborhoods that aren't multi-generational where this fraternity could go that you know of, like within walking distance of UGA?
That's a great question. And I would say it wouldn't have to be a neighborhood, is anything that you know, where people who sleep regular hours aren't sleeping. It could be next to parking or academic building or, in a sports field. There are so many other uses that I can think of, but no, I haven't looked at sites.
Thank you. Excellent.
Does anybody have anything else to say? We do have a motion and a second. Before we take that vote. I think we'll go ahead and vote. Do you want to do a roll call vote?
Do you want to restate the motion? It's a
Please.
motion to deny?
Yeah, the motion is to deny the request.
Gary,
No.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
No.
Rowland,
Yes.
Tucker.
No.
Motion passes 4-3.
Okay, so the application is denied. Do we need to do anything else with that? Okay, so we'll recommend denial. Okay, thank you very much. Give us a minute to let this clear out.
Thank you.
Send me that email.
I've already mailed.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
It's like your money. It's from NIMBY's.
This application.
A lot of them, yeah. Then
I
last
agree.
time going like. I guess, you know, we have like, you know, it's like 2 reasons. Yeah, one child, no, one, yes. And she had a really.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the second item under new business, which is 290, 310, and 322 North Avenue. And this one is, so this one is, we're receiving with comment only tonight.
Is it working?
Yeah, it's on.
Sorry? It's on. I think sometimes you have to click on the. That clicks on the screen. All right. All right, round 2. This is the staff presentation for 290, 310, and 322 North Avenue. The applicant is requesting to go from commercial general to commercial general plan development for the purpose of building a mixed-use commercial and residential project. Specifically, the commercial side would have a gas station, retail, and drive-through restaurant. The residential component would have 24 townhouse-style multifamily units, 3 to 4 bedroom units, 78 bedrooms total. And it would also have the required parking and stormwater detention pond. The applicant has also requested 5 waivers as part of their application. Staff supports the first waiver, which is a waiver to do less ground floor commercial. It's on a site that's over 5 acres. Staff supports this because it doesn't make sense to cover the entire site in commercial. Waivers 2 through 4, we don't support basically because the applicant has not demonstrated that they can't comply with these, that they have some kind of unique condition, some kind of hardship that would warrant this, and they really haven't made an effort to meet the spirit of this code with their application. And then finally, the last waiver is actually not eligible for waiver, for waiving after looking at our code because it's in a separate chapter. Here's the site. It's on North Avenue. This is the main street you can see cutting up through the picture. We have the former Piggly Wiggly Shopping Center up here at the top. And then if you go farther north, then you would find the loop is just beyond the edge of this frame. We've got a little commercial node up here, and then some state services. I think it's DFAX might be located here. Some residences off to the other side. And then the school is just off to the right of your screen there. You can see the lot is basically wooded. At one point, it had some houses and some outdoor storage on it. They've long since disappeared. This property, like the rest of this little node here, it has a future land use designation of general business. You can also see there's some government future land use covering the school and some of the ACC uses there. And then you can also see the mixed density. This is the Bray Street project that you would have seen a month or two ago. Property carries commercial general zoning, as does a significant portion of North Avenue. It's part of this commercial node, and that would not change. It would go to a CGPD. This is our site plan. You see North Avenue is on your left here, faintly visible there. You can see the gas station is right here with its canopy. There would be commercial retail here and a drive-through restaurant right here. And then on the back, you would have the townhomes oriented along those private streets there. And then at the very back is where the stormwater pond would be. This is the architecture that's been submitted. All of the townhomes have front-loaded garages. They open up onto the street there. And then you can see the illustrations for the commercial retail, pretty typical stuff. These are some renderings supplied by the applicant, just to give you an idea of what it might look like. North Avenue is the main street cutting through there, and you can see the shopping center off to the left. This is the a little zoomed in version of that as well. Then we have, this is the street level view as you're coming in from North Avenue, as you're going up towards the loop. One of our primary points is that this doesn't engage the street, doesn't create a pedestrian welcoming entrance here or connection or design. This is what you get if you're walking along North Avenue, and there's quite a few folks who walk, bike, or bus along North Avenue. And the code calls for street engagement, direct pedestrian connections, really with the intent of creating something that's not as automobile oriented as this design is, especially when you're asking folks to cross an area that's going to be filled with people backing in, backing out, moving in, moving out as they're getting gas. This is if you were standing right behind the drive-through restaurant looking at the townhomes. You can see there's a wall there, and it's clearly meant to separate the residential side from the commercial side. Our expectation here is that it would be integrated, but in light of not integrating, they haven't even offered the buffer that we just talked about on this previous application, how important it is to potentially buffer incompatible uses. So there's really no buffer here. There's also no integration. Our code calls for a better integrated mix here than what is being shown. This is the residential street. There are no yards per se here. It's townhouse style, and they're front loaded. So this entire space is going to be dominated by automobiles, and it really should probably be a place where we would want residents to linger, to socialize, to meet neighbors, to watch each other's kids. And this design really doesn't create a sense of place for people to build a neighborhood there. Our report, our analysis concludes that this is inconsistent with the 2018 comprehensive plan. Yes, it does add some housing on an infill location. This is a prime infill location, but it limits the multimodal connectivity. It's really automobile oriented, particularly at a node here. We want to see that connection, that cross pollination between those parcels, so that folks can access their daily destinations and really generate vibrancy there. The uses here don't really enhance that node is another concern. We already have 2 gas stations within walking distance of this site. A third one doesn't necessarily enhance the vibrancy of that node and the multi-use nature of it. It's very car oriented, no sense of place. I just mentioned those things looking at the illustrations here. It is consistent with the future land use and the zoning maps. They don't need to change those maps. But if you were to read the definition of the general business future land use, there's an expectation, particularly in certain areas like this one, for walkable design. That's not present here in this design. So It's consistent with the future land use map, not necessarily with the expectation that goes along with that designation. Transportation and Public Works has significant concerns about the impact of this project on North Avenue because they have received a $25 million federal grant to improve, transform North Avenue to be more friendly to folks walking, biking, and busing along that street. And this flies in the face of that. And TPW also does not, cannot support the driveway waiver that the applicant has mentioned. That's the one that they're ineligible to ask for in the first place. Site, not only does it run contrary to some of our bigger picture plans and planning principles, it also runs afoul of the code. There's 10 code compliance issues that we've identified. And then finally, staff supports the first waiver on the ground floor commercial. We oppose the waivers 2 through 4. 2 of those are regarding tree canopy and plantings. The applicant is basically proposing to wipe the site almost completely clean and then plant back less than what would be required. So they're not conserving enough and they're not planting back enough. And there's really, on a site that's almost all wooded, no justification that staff can see to support a waiver from that ask. Here, our CG zoning code is written to encourage a vertical mix of uses, plazas or green spaces for public mingling, ample pedestrian access throughout the site and to other sites nearby, placing buildings close to the street with direct pedestrian connections, all under the intent of creating safe, comfortable, interesting, and useful places for people to go about their daily lives. So I know we hear criticisms of our code. We know that it has some shortcomings. In this case, the code really is kind of leaning in on the planning principles that a lot of folks have expressed support for. So our recommendation as staff, right now it's comments only, it's just preliminary. What we want to see in the master plans that the applicant would incorporate these principles and also meet the code. They happen to be very much aligned on this site, and that's our recommendation. And I'll turn it over to Planning Commission.
And next we'll hear from our applicant.
Thank you, David Ellison, 2500 Danielsbridge Road, on behalf of the applicant. Can we go to the site plan? And so we understand we're going to rework the site plan. And so we appreciate y'all's comments this evening so we can figure out the best path forward for this project. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is this easement right here. Okay, this is a Georgia Power transmission easement that takes up almost 3/4 of the property here. And you have to keep in mind that right now, this is actually 4 parcels that we're combining. And this easement actually takes out at least the entire frontage of the first 2 lots and a large portion of the third. And so that really drives a lot of what we're requesting. And if I can figure out how to operate this real quick. And this is can help illustrate one of the problems we're facing is that on the right side, you see that you have front yard parking here. Okay, because these were grandfathered in before this particular zoning regulation came in place. This other side has what staff is desiring from us, which is parking immediately adjacent to the road. Problem is that easement right here. You know, we can't construct anything within that easement area. And so that is the key issue that we're facing here. Another thing to keep in mind is that there's a general policy of interconnectivity with other parcels. So this Advanced Auto Parts here, you know, we're trying to keep that interparcel access right here. And so the one area where we could potentially put some of the building outside of the easement area would completely block that interparcel access. Another point to keep in mind too is about the trees. You can see this is an entirely wooded parcel here. And we understand that there are valid concerns about, and valid policy objectives to conserve tree canopy. But in this instance, almost the entire parcel is filled with trees. And we're going to rework the site plan to see what we can preserve to get it below the 0%. But at the end of the day, I don't know if we can meet 10%. And the thing to keep in mind is that this property is blighted. This property is within a TAD. And as a result of that, any investment that goes into this particular site is going to be reinvested into this district. And so we ask that you please keep that in mind as you consider your comments and future approval, because it's the arborist wants to treat this for conservation. That's inconsistent with the TAD that the county has put on this parcel. So we want development on this site. My client owns this property. He's not not under contract. He wants to do something that works, but it's a difficult site. We understand that there are some concerns about the automotive use, but drive-throughs are authorized by right in the zoning district. The gas station is authorized by right in the zoning district. So if there are concerns with the uses and what this should be, the zoning code needs to change. So my client bought this property in reliance upon these upon these uses. And so we don't think that's a fair criticism of the project. So we would just ask that we want to hear your comments tonight because we know we're going to have to rework this. But at the end of the day, we're trying to do something that's commercial. It provides housing towards a commercial node, which is one of the objectives of the comprehensive plan. As it's a difficult site. You can see this easement takes up a huge portion of the very front. It's triangular in the back, so it forces everything towards the front, and then it's still uneven because you have the advanced auto parts here. So a lot of different objectives and competing objectives of this property. So welcome your comments and any questions y'all may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this application?
I would. I'm Ed Chimmel. I actually live in Jackson County, 30 Charing Cross Lane. But I own the laundromat that's very near this property. And I've owned it for 20 years. And we bought that laundromat kind of as a retirement business. And I like the laundromat. I like serving people. They're lower income people, very sweet people. And it's a good location. It's been there for 30-something years. The problem we have right now is this property is wooded and it's a magnet for homeless. There's also, if you have that picture back up, you can see where the woods go behind the shopping center and even into the Clarke County school system. So this is a godsend for this area because, and I don't want to be dismissive of homeless people. I'm a Christian, so I have a heart for what we could do with them, but I don't have the answer. But I know the answer is not for them to live in those woods right there. And the current owner was cited for trash violations. There was 3 or 4 people living there and they leave trash. And so I thought this would be a slam dunk. I saw the plan. It looks wonderful to me. And so I just want to speak in favor of it because we have a homeless issue here in Clarke County, and most of them, there's lots of counties that are sending them here now because we're sympathetic to them, and a lot of them come right there, and then on surrounding behind the, and they're dangerous. They're drug dealers, they're prostitutes, and that kind of stuff. So this would elevate this area. DFAX is right below there. There's another, I think, maybe the Department of Labor is on down there. This whole area was gentrifying. It's a wonderful area, but this, I would love for you to approve this because it is a problem for, and that shopping center is owned by U-Haul, which is Ramco, I believe so. So it's the national, the national corporation. It's not a franchise or whatever, but Piggly Wiggly still has they still have their store there. So anyway, that was why I was just so relieved to see that they were gonna do something with this property. And if they can't do this, please work with them so we can get this property developed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the application? And is there anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Okay, great. So just as a reminder, this is comments only. So tonight we give feedback and we hopefully then see this come back down the road for an actual vote for recommendation. So would anyone like to start us off? Lucy?
When I looked at this, I thought, this really, it's almost like two separate requests. One at the back is going to be for resident, the one at the front is going to be for commercial. And yes, I recognize it's got the easement, but I was thinking the residential would probably be benefited by being designed as a cottage court, which is, of course, it creates that central gathering space, so to speak. And we've got smaller type houses on, or shall I say, you don't have so much in the way of green space right around all the houses. But I think you could probably work it as a cottage court, which is seen mostly on the West Coast. We don't see it much. But that, because I was looking at the proposed street, the private street, and that takes up a tremendous amount of real estate that could probably be benefited by having it as a more compact, more centrally located. That's why I suggested the cottage court. And that way, and could you put up the list of principles that we were talking about earlier? That, I think, it'd be a good way to incorporate those principles. Yeah. That way you could actually, it would be a total redesign of the residential. And it might be less so of the commercial, but I think that would be a good starting point, was to get to the cottage court. Edith, did you want to say something?
Sure. I mostly wanted to say I'm 100% with staff on this one. I think we have our future land use map. We have the grant for North Avenue that, whatever goes here should really work with. I don't know what kind of information is available on that, but it'd be great to have a development that complements the huge investment in the right of way. And just, refer to the usual. I think we can demand a higher standard of design. Designers who are conscious of walkable urbanism, human scale neighborhoods, all our favorite catchwords, and that the staff has recommended. I think that's the way to start looking for a human scale development that will complement the new North Avenue multimodal corridor.
Kristen and Sarah, that?
Yeah, I know I'm making a lot of assumptions by saying this, but I feel like when this was designed, somebody just said, give me the easiest commercial and give me the easiest residential, because it's drive-through, it's a gas station. Like, why do we need more of those? And then, we'll just put some townhouses in because everybody says we're in a housing crisis. And I just, it was just the most bizarre thing to look at. And and this coming from someone who was just approving like a fraternity being 200 feet from houses, like I would not in any way support this. And if this development came back looking like this again, there's no way I could support that either. This is what I would call a design challenge, but it's not insurmountable. But I would just challenge the applicant to think about the neighborhood and the needs of the neighborhood and what can make it better, not just put stuff on a piece of property to make money and that's it.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussions of the difficulties with this parcel that y'all have been facing. I'm not entirely, I'm not at all persuaded by the fact that you can build a drive-through by right there, you can build housing by right there, and you can build a gas station by right there, because y'all are here. Like, y'all came here for a reason. There's something y'all trying to do that you need the plan development for. And I understand that in order to try to get this to work, you were kind of picking and choosing, like, what waivers are we going to ask for? What do we have to give up in order to meet all the other standards that we have here? And so this is my thoughts on standards that would make more sense to ask for waivers on, that might be less, those standards might be less valuable in this spot than the standards that you have adhered to, and in the process lost the trees and the connection to the pedestrian corridor, which I don't know if y'all are able to talk with Transportation Public Works, if you're able to talk with the bike ped coordinator and the folks who got this really, really outstanding grant to get more insight into what they're planning. Or if those folks might come back the next time we have this, because I found having staff if those folks might be able to come in and speak the next time y'all are back, because I found that having the fire department and public utilities officials here last time was really helpful. And if they can make it out with all the considerations here, that would be great. So the two things that I saw that I thought maybe these would be less important and easier to give up. You mentioned the interparcel access being generally something that's favored and is a requirement. And looking at this section of North Avenue, I wonder if that might be something that would be worth giving up, if it would mean having a more pedestrian-friendly frontage. Because yeah, it is, you have a North Avenue up to that point, and then you have the auto zone and the U-Haul parking lot ocean and the saddest Piggly Wiggly and several gas stations, and then an interchange onto the highway. So I do wonder if it might make sense to, or if the folks working on this corridor project might have ideas about how they're gonna deal with that already incredibly auto-centric space. And if it might make sense that everything that comes before that auto zone is one way, and then there's a point of time around that auto zone where they handle it a different way. The other thing that I saw was requirement for buildings to align with the primary right-of-way. And I think that this also calls back to Commissioner Rowland discussing the cottage court idea. When I think of a cottage court, I think of like a ring or a U-shape that wouldn't necessarily align with the primary right-of-way in the same way that we have these townhouses. And so if that gives you more options with the geometry, I think that might be an interesting way to go about trying to get what you need in this weird parcel.
I think we had Matt next and then Joey. Did I have that right?
So I agree with a lot of what's been said already. I think the auto-centric nature of this is unnecessary and kind of exactly wrong, given the enormous grant that the city just got. I appreciate Mr. Ellison's comments about the easement and the effect on that. And you know, I don't know the solutions, but I was going to suggest what Commissioner Goering suggested about meeting with maybe the transportation people who are working on the grant and on the redesign and seeing what could work well there. And yeah, maybe it doesn't need to connect to the auto zone if that enables you to have a driveway and also front your buildings on the street. The tree canopy thing, I'll just put this out there. It kind of surprised me that exceptionally low conserved tree canopy requirement in commercial general, which is only 10%, that appeared to y'all to be problematic. Certainly it's more efficient from a bulldozing and building perspective to not have any trees in the way, but that's why we have a conserved tree canopy requirement, is because developers often opt to take down trees that they don't have to and that we don't want them to. So I would not be inclined to support anything in that regard. Yeah, I guess that's all I have to say.
Joey?
I'm not, difficult lot, not sure. From looking at this, here I go on the other side. I kind of like looking at this. I was waiting for somebody to say the keyword walkability because I just cracked up from what we just experienced to now. So I'm going to run with that for a second. And then, cottage court, I heard that thrown out, and you think about cottage court, you think about trying to pack those in or position those in a different way. And, we had couple applications a few weeks ago or a month ago or so with fire trucks getting in and being able to turn. And this is a very straight in, get out. If for fire protection and you start getting cottage court, you start moving houses around, then you got roads narrowed, you got difficulty getting equipment in there. Then we got a whole nother issue that they got to deal with. The tree canopy, I would like to see the tree canopy, try to work with that and see what we can do there. But I'm looking at this project going, what is the best use? We got a housing crisis in town. You've got a great use of townhomes here. You've got commercial up front, gas stations and drive-through. I assume the property owner is looking at and seeing the number of gas stations up and down the road and done their traffic count for gas station and for drive-through, so they see that fits. So, I look at this and with a few modifications and looking at a few things, I think this would be a fit for the property because, it could be walkable. Somebody could walk downtown from there. That's what our keyword's going to be. But I just don't, I'd like to see a little bit done to it, but overall, I think this property, it's a difficult property to look at, and the area that it's in, this to me would help the area. I understand the homelessness over there. I understand property values over there. I understand all of that. And having something like that could help that entire area, I think would be a positive. So I would like to see this development. Maybe it does not look like this, but I hope to see this petitioner come back. And I hope to see a good development here because this Athens-Clarke County needs this in this area and needs something like this. I think the townhouse, this concept to me is a need and it's a great looking concept. If it's a cottage court thing, I would like to see how you're going to make this in there and how you're going to put this in there with the design. But overall, there's just a few adjustments that I would like to see done. But overall, I think this property needs something like this.
I agree with Joey that, we definitely want to see this property developed and the idea of combining residential and commercial in this particular area makes a ton of sense. When you look at the amenities that are around there, like most of the other people who've spoken, I am very put off by the auto-centric street frontage. And just so you know, that when I use the term walkability, I'm talking a lot about, the experience of the pedestrian on the streetscape. So certainly we do want to have people living close to services that they can walk to, but we also want it to make it walkable. That is a pleasant, and safe walking experience. So that is my biggest issue is that, you can't get more auto-centric than a gas station and a drive-through restaurant. It really, for me, it has everything to do with how does this front of this property interact with the streetscape and this is not at all what we envision in any of our planning so far for this corridor. I did not know about the grant, the raised grant, I think it's called. I didn't know about it until I read the staff report, so I'm not surprised if the applicant hasn't really had a chance to hop on that either. But I'm glad that issue has come up because I think that probably would be a very productive meeting to kind of for the applicant to be able to get some ideas of, what are the transportation people thinking in terms of, it could still be a gas station just so that it is, so that it addresses the street in a more pedestrian friendly way. As far as the residential and back goes, it does kind of look like this, you know, it is sort of, okay, we'll pick this up from Anywhere USA and put it here, but of course that changes when people move in. But my main issue is either separate it or don't from the commercial use. The one picture that we saw where we were looking at the back of one of the commercial uses, and in all these pictures, there's never a car or a dumpster or a truck or anything like that. But that's really close to the windows of the townhomes that are just adjacent there. So, you know, when we tend to think of these kind of mixed use, commercial in front, residential in the back, what we've seen in recent months are developments where they're deliberately integrated. I mean, you can think of the request over on Oglethorpe. You can think of the mall development, which is about 500 times bigger than this, of course. But so the one on Oglethorpe may be a better example. But the idea is to have commercial that will benefit the residents and give them an easy way to get there. If what's offered up front is a gas station and a drive-through restaurant, you're probably going to drive your car from down there because there's no good way to get there. So I really would love to see a good development that goes in here that has that basic concept of commercial and residential, but I could not support the current way that it addresses the street. That's sort of the biggest thing for me that I'll put out there. So.
I might add some comment to that too.
Go ahead. Quick question. Yep. Is there a sidewalk along? Like, there's no sidewalk along here, correct?
There is.
There is.
I just read.
You just never think about it because walking down it is terrifying. I don't know if anyone else in this room has actually walked down that corridor, but I when I dropped my car off my shop, Danielsville Road.
It just wasn't like there's lots of things noted, but there wasn't like specifically a sidewalk. But maybe it's just
The
this
sidewalk
grayed
goes
out
all the way
part.
to downtown. I don't know what the transportation department, and you can shut me up if I'm not supposed to.
I think you're not.
Yeah, no, it's just about me reading a site plan and being able to see things that I guess are maybe laid out, and I'm just not reading it properly. So don't mind me. Sorry, go ahead.
But I would suspect also that the raise grant will result in that if there been some sort of improvement to the records there. I think what I wanted to add, I generally agree with the comments Alice was just making. I know this is kind of a tough site to develop, and I really don't like this plan, but I really like the idea of developing it in a mixed use sort of way. And I know it's tricky to kind of think about types of housing units to build and whether what has to happen here has to be a townhouse, why we can't go up a little bit is a CG zone. To me, adding stories to what's happening, both from the standpoint of what's happening on the commercial side of the property as well as residential, it activates the street better. Possibly you could build in, maybe you can have a diversity of housing units in there where maybe townhomes aren't the only thing. Maybe there are some units that are like apartments. I think that I like the cottage court idea. I just don't like to me, this is a commercial site and it would be great to get residential there too. And it just feels like commercial, residential, like just two different things. It's not integrated. I think that's where I'm just kind of repeating what others say. Also, this choice is what's causing the need for the scorched earth tree situation. Like, I think, again, I'd rather see almost no, there's more pavement happening in here. There's this wall between the two. I just think it just needs a whole new look from maybe a designer who is really thinking about these sort of more integrated site plans where it's not so separated out. So I'll just leave it at that. I think I'm just kind of repeating what others have said, but does anyone else have comments they want to make? The applicant? Okay, I guess we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the third item under new business, which is 4075 to 4079 Barnett Shoals Road. Starts.
All right, this is the staff presentation for Barnett Shoals Road case. The applicant is asking to amend an RS-25 plan development, that's a residential single-family zoning category, for the purpose of adding a fourth parcel or fourth lot without the required road front that our code calls for. There's 3 existing lots here, just over 3 acres apiece. Each one has a single-family house on it, and there's 1 driveway that serves all 3 of these parcels. The proposal is to split the rear parcel into 2 lots to add a single-family house. Those 3 parcels are family-owned, and the idea is to add another family-owned parcel there. They've also asked for a waiver to reduce the required conserved or tree canopy from 50% to 0%. Staff opposes this waiver. This is the site as it currently exists. You can see that each lot is stacked relative to the road. Our code would generally call for these lots to each have their own frontage on the road, meeting a minimum frontage requirement. And that's why they got a PD like this in the first place some 30 years ago. And so the idea then would be to, first of all, it is single family residential as a future land use. They're not changing that. Same thing with the zoning, it's RS-25 PD, and they're not proposing to change that. This is what they are proposing to change. They're proposing to split that last lot there into 2 to create room for a 4th house on the lot. And then this gives you a better picture of what actually would be included in that. From a policy standpoint of a big picture, it's consistent with the future land use map. It's consistent with the zoning map because there's no changes that need to be made there. The comprehensive plan doesn't really speak to things of this nature. It speaks to larger scale issues. So in that way, it's not inconsistent with the 2018 comprehensive plan. The layout, however, is incompatible with our current ordinance standards, which is why they're here today. And really, based on what they've provided, there's really not enough details here to justify the requests. PDs usually come with a certain amount of binding nature to them, and the applicant really hasn't provided that level of detail that we require in exchange for offering these exemptions and flexibility to the code. And staff also does not support the waiver request. Again, the applicant really hasn't demonstrated why they need the waiver request or why they can't meet it. There's no big picture opposition here to this, and so if the applicant were to provide some details about where they're going to site the house, where they're going to site the septic field, how are they going to observe the setbacks and the buffers, how they're going to treat the trees on site, we could potentially work through this. But what's been currently provided to us, we don't want to set a precedent for just giving us very little justification, very little information to ask for a deviation from the code. So that's why we're recommending denial at this time. That concludes the report.
Next, we'll hear from the applicant.
Starts on stuff. Can you pull up the illustration, the exhibit?
And I'd also like to have the slide of where you had said denial at the bottom.
Okay. We can do one or the other at the moment.
Okay, yeah, we'll just start with that one first rather than this one.
You guys see that?
Yes.
Can you pull up the one with you have the recommendation for denial?
Sure.
various points, yeah. All right, great. All right, so my name is Brett Thurman. I live at 160 West Thompson Street, Bogart, Georgia, and I represent the Savages. And that's a family name and it's not a characterization. They own the 3 parcels there. This has been an old PD for a long time. The grandfather lives on the middle lot. The mom and dad live on the rear lot. A sister lives on the front lot. And they're in agreement that they would like the other sister to be able to live there on this parcel with them. So that was the nature of the request, so that we could provide an additional house for another family member in what is, quite frankly, I feel like is a very close-knit family. I asked other members of the family to be here tonight to talk about them. They couldn't be here because what were they doing? They went to Florida for a cheer team event for one of the granddaughters. They're all down there. So this is a close-knit family. And sometimes when I submit stuff to Athens, I'm always amazed sometimes what comes out with regards to recommendations. Today, quite frankly, I'm hoping for some symmetry where the first one I was involved with had a recommendation of approval from staff and ended up being denied by this board. That we have a recommendation for denial from the staff, and I'm looking for a recommendation of approval by this board. And so I'm hoping there's some symmetry there. I don't know if that's true or not. With regards to the layout, I assume the layout is incompatible with current ordinance standards because it doesn't have a front section of the property that fronts Barnett Shoals Road. And so that can't be possibly any way can be done any other way than to use the private drive that's already existing to gain access to the rear lot, and which is currently there. And that does meet the requirement for 3 lots on a single road. That's allowed. So I don't see that as a problem for this PD. Also, we didn't provide sufficient details to justify a request. That is correct, because obviously I got crossways with staff on what they were thinking we needed to do, because I had a plan that had information on it. And what I got out of it was it would be a binding plan, and then that would open up a whole nother can of worms. And so we went this way and dumbed it down. So that brings us then to the point about the waiver request, and I will speak to that with this other slide. And then some other problems that staff identified in the report was that the driveway is not in the current access easement. I assume that was the issue for the comment regarding the fact that it might cause problems in the future if family members are not owning these parcels. But that's easy to solve. I'll put the easement where the road is. That's not an issue. And if it's got a gravel road. It's mainly a 2-track road. Essentially, it's been serviceable for multiple decades, and I don't see how improving that in any way, shape, or form causes a problem in this particular case. Now, if you guys say, "Oh, we really would like to see a wider gravel road there," my clients will put it in and be inside a new 25-foot buffer, because there's plenty of room there. Provide that and would follow the existing track. So if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Did you want the slide or the image that was up?
Excuse me, our image, yes, the things I sent. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So this is the rear lot. The red rectangle is the proposed house. The rest of the brown are all existing structures that are there. The green is everything that's in tree canopy now. And although it's more tree canopy than we're showing there, because I got to put the house in there and I have to put a septic field in, and I can't put the septic field amongst all those trees that are growing. I got to have I got to be able to pull some of that up and get the septic field in. Both the lots meet the requirement of RS 25 zoning.
when split. You see the road as it exists, as we've identified in the aerial views. The red line on the other side of the road is the 25-foot easement. It runs up to the rear property, and then there'll be an easement for that little jog there. There's a little line that runs slashing back down to the road there. That's the property line. We've set the property line 10 feet from the back of the house, so we meet all the code requirements for the main house lot that's staying there. And it also allows us to have a big enough lot to meet all the requirements for 25 RS-25 zoning. It allows us to get the septic in, and it allows us to also have the correct distances for the septic field from all the surrounding properties that are required. So there's a lot of different things here that are going on. And quite frankly, there's only a few places to put the septic field that will meet the requirements of the lot. And putting it down closer between lot 3 and lot 2 there is not an option because we can't get the driveway in right. And we could move the driveway up, and now I want to take out more trees. So I think we've got a great plan here. And I think certainly it's a type of situation where this isn't some developer coming to Athens and wanting to tear down all the trees on the lot. You know, these are the trees that are there. We've identified this canopy. Jump to the second slide while I'm at it, because it shows the existing tree canopy there. And frankly, we meet the conserved canopy for RS-25, and we meet the conserved plus planting canopy, because the conserved canopy now is over that required by what's required to be, which is 50%. The existing lot, when it's subdivided off, will be at 51%, and our lot, the new lot, will be at 61%. So it's going to meet the requirement for conserved, and no trees will have to be planted. And then one last thing, go to the next picture. At one time, somebody had offered up this as a design back in the 90s for this parcel. And of course, that wasn't done. I've got no clue why that wasn't done, other than the fact it's horrible, right, Brad? It's horrible. So they decided it was better to go ahead, let's cut this parcel, even though we've got lots behind it that aren't going to front Barnett Shoals. But at least we've got a parcels that do work, and it falls within the requirements of the ordinance for the number of lots served by a private drive. So I will stop now and hope that I'll get a recommendation of approval from this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of this application?
I do. I'm Kelly Savage. I am the other sister that's applying for this parcel. So I grew up on this whole property. My parents and grandparents and great-grandparents bought this whole property 30 years ago when I was 4. So I grew up in that back lot, but I always told everybody that I had 3 houses because it was all of my family. So when we got a little bit older, my great-grandparents unfortunately passed away, but that was within the timing that my sister was in a good position to purchase the first lot. So that's what happened there. It just happened to be really good timing with that. So you might be wondering why now I want to split this. And my reason is I got divorced last year. I have 2 small girls. My sister has 2 small children, and really, I need my village. It's me. The economy is horrible. The market is horrible. And this is doable for me because my parents are literally going to gift me land. And I can afford to do this. So I'm just really hoping that this is something that's approved just for the sake of keeping a family close and keeping a family all together so that my kids can do the same. I have 3 houses, that I did growing up. I just think it would be really good for our family to have everybody there together and the rest of my family agrees. They, like Mr. Brett said, they couldn't be here because they're all in Florida supporting my 8-year-old niece with her cheering competition. So all of them are there, but we're all very close and all of them are in agreement and nobody has any problems with this. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the project? Okay, and anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? Okay, looks like we can bring it to planning commission discussion. Matt, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I guess, let me start with a question for the applicant. Did I understand you to say that you have a plan now with the septic and everything where you do not need the waiver that was requested from the conserved tree canopy, and that you can solve the easement problem that staff pointed out as well by reconfiguring or enlarging or something the easement in relation to that road?
So, yeah, two things. One, for the tree canopy, when we were trying to put this together and, it came back that, well, if I submit something showing the house and everything, it's a binding plan. And so at that point, we made the decision, let's just ask for the waiver, just so that we could get the project moved through and approved. And so, but the issue here is greater than that because we have to put the house in there. The lot has to be a certain size and the septic system can only go certain ways too. And the Environmental Health Department is very strict about it. I just finally got a preliminary plat approved after over a year wrangling with the Environmental Health Department on septic tank. So we would meet the canopy requirement of conserved canopy on both these lots for RS-25 zone.
So you don't need that waiver?
You don't need that waiver. That's correct. Now, with regards to the road easement, there is a 50-foot easement, and unfortunately, it runs right down the left sideline of the property. And the road skews off from that. So it moves outside of that original 50-foot easement. But it's been being used for decades. And so it seems to me it's a whole lot easier to get all the parties who are in agreement already for this to do away with that 50-foot easement and put a new 25-foot easement centered on the road so that it meets compliance. It has compliance then and would solve the issue of a road being outside of an easement that it might cause a problem for potential owners in the future.
Thank you. So yeah, I guess my comment is this seems like an easy approval to me with consideration to the staff's concerns. I had the same concern about conserved canopy, and I understand the point about an easement when it stops being all savages all over all of these parcels in 100 years or whenever somebody who's not a family member buys one of these. It's a problem that we can solve now easily. And so I guess, Brad, is there any other practical concern that you would, I'm not going to make a motion right now, but if I were to make a motion after we hear from some more people, are there any other things you'd want us to consider in the way of conditions other than not having a waiver from the canopy and providing an easement over the existing drive?
I guess it depends on, because this is the first time I've seen this. I'm not saying that it doesn't work or anything else, but it's a little bit out of the ordinary. Not that you legally couldn't do it, but it would really almost, if you wanted this to move forward as a binding plan with the PD, you would have to make it a condition that the plan submitted at the meeting be considered a binding plan, and that would be without the benefit of us reviewing it for any further detailed information.
I think I would hesitate to make it a binding plan for that exact reason, but could we not just specify that?
You could just approve the PD and not grant the waivers and require the easement be relocated over the existing driveway without a binding plan showing the location of the house or the septic tank, but they would then be obligated to meet the canopy requirements, which sounds like they can.
If it ended up that the house needed to be 2 foot, 2 feet this way or that way, I don't think any of us would, I don't think anyone in Athens-Clarke County has any interest in that.
Well, and it would,
You wouldn't want to make it.
without the house shown, you know, if the plan that moves forward is still just the creation of the fourth lot, but the waivers are not granted, there's no waiver to any kind of a setback requirement anyway, so the house would have to be positioned legally to meet code.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave it there for now.
Sarah? Yes. Brett, I ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay, you have placed a septic field there.
Mhm.
What is your reasoning for it? Have you had the soils tested?
Yes,
You have.
yes. It's all been tested. It perks. That's a design.
That was the only question I
And the
had.
reason why it's there
Yeah.
is the parcel next to it is not developed.
Mhm.
And so therefore I can't put that septic tank, excuse me, I can't put that drain field any closer than 50 feet from that property line.
Right.
Property behind it is undeveloped. And so I can't put it closer to 50 feet from the back property line. And so that's how we ended up with this location and set
Okay.
drain field.
My main question is have you had those soils tested?
Have had it and they perk great.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate all this discussion. It's been really helpful. My biggest concern was, as Matt was saying, the tree canopy and the problem with the easement, but I feel like those problems can be dealt with, you know, through conditions. So I'm inclined to be in favor of this request. This is completely tangential, but I grew up in Homeland, Alabama, where the best bakery in town still lives, and it's called Savage's Bakery. This is not swaying my vote one bit. You're probably not even related. But lots of jokes about Savage's Bakery. But yeah, if you want, especially like, yeah, now I'm gonna get my car and drive to Homeland, Alabama after the meeting. Be there in time for Savage's to open in the morning.
Joey and then Kristen.
Seeing this plan is very helpful. I think that, you know, I'm all for, as y'all know, private property rights, and I believe looking at these lots, and the lot is over an acre. You know, I think with this plan and where the septic sits, and I see the existing well and the buffer around there, so I have no problem with this. I like the way that looks, and I'm inclined to support it. And I would like to say it seems very walkable to the neighbor's house.
Kristen.
I was just gonna say that I actually have no problems with the driveway. I feel a little weird, like coming after the fact, looking at something on the screen when I would have been okay with looking at this earlier. But I don't know, maybe I can piggyback on what, like, I'm inclined to just make a motion to approve, but I feel like Matt worked out all the fancy notes with Brad, so, so I'll make a motion to approve,
I think you want to do a couple things with it.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
You want to make, if you're going that direction, I would say that you make a motion to approve with condition that the tree canopy coverage requirements be met for the RS-25 zone, and that code compliance issues 1 and 2, as indicated in the staff report, also be addressed.
Yes.
3 was an old condition of a big buffer around the whole property that I don't think that, you know, this would basically be removing that with this.
Should I remove?
Yeah, I would say the
1 and 2.
Just one.
1 and 2 be met, and 3 be removed
Yeah,
as part of the PD.
yes.
So just to be clear,
So the waiver,
approving the waiver
right, the waiver does not apply to.
and then requiring compliance with the 2 issues that staff brought up, 1 and 2.
Right, and removing item 3.
From the original.
Right.
From the PD, yes.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, I don't have a clear feeling on this, but just the idea of the precedent it's setting of being able to kind of create this subdivision. I mean, why not do it to both the other 2 lots too? And would that be a bad thing? I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes frontage requirements, you know, kind of create sprawl. Yeah, we're just producing all these. I mean, if if anyone can do this, we're just producing lots of 1 acre lots in the middle of nowhere. I don't know if that's the planning policy we should be. But I don't know, I totally am in favor of, I think it's great that, you know, a bunch of houses are clustered on a dirt road in the countryside, they can look out for each other. No, that's great. But I don't know, it's also a little sprawly if everyone has their own little house on their own acre. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Does it help to think of this as a cottage court?
I mean, you could put a lot of cottages on each one of these lots.
Actually, I think you can call it a compound.
That's how I think of it.
Yeah.
I think you got utility restrictions out here too that are, I mean, this is served by well and septic, so you really couldn't cluster this far out in this location.
And it is RS 25.
So what's that minimum lot size?
Minimum lot
25,000.
Yeah.
So this new lot still complies with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, but isn't that kind of a sprawly dimension?
Yes.
Like what if this whole area became 1 acre lots? That'd be kind of bad.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a rural part of the county anyway. I know what you're saying, but I was thinking about that. Like, does this just like, do we have a bunch of people then wanting to come in, do this? And I think it would be problematic, you know, getting approval for all these PDs, like, for as long as we have these frontage requirements. I mean, this one got in years ago. I don't think it's necessarily going to create a bunch of that, but I don't know. It's already kind of rural, and 1 acre lots don't bother me in that context, but because I think it'd be limited by sewer or lack thereof and things like that, but I don't know. I saw someone else's hand come up. Sarah.
Yeah, I was gonna respond to Katie's call for comment and I was waiting to get called on. Yeah, but also what Sarah said, I feel like the context of sprawl is rural sized lots adjacent to urban land. And as far out as this is, like I'm a big fan of urban areas, urbanization. And I have this conversation often with people where with my more crunchy friends who like rural areas, like being able to live in rural areas and want people to still be able to live there. And like, I'm for rural areas and I'm for urban areas. It's the suburban areas. It would be weird if we had like a reverse sprawl where like people just did this all the way in towards, but it doesn't seem very, very likely to happen. But it's worth like keeping in mind, yeah.
Are there any other comments before we take a vote? Did we get a second on that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Any further discussion or comments?
Sorry, one more thing. Okay, no, all right, so we don't allow accessory dwelling units yet, but
Never.
maybe next year, let's hope. I can see that as a very appropriate place, you know, it's tied to the other property, their family, but there's also some independence.
To an in-town neighborhood near you, then.
All right, that's not really a comment, but yeah, I love the idea of the family compound. It's just, there's a lot of sprawl going on here too that I don't see why everyone else in the neighborhood couldn't do that either.
If we allowed ADUs out there, it could solve the problem without a amendment.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's this whole idea of like, you want villages in the countryside, you know, people are close together, but then you have expanses of rural land that everyone can enjoy. So maybe allow a big cluster, but then make sure that, 5 acres is preserved around that and as a farm or a forest or whatever.
Now, the other restriction with the ADU ordinance as presented through the commission was that it would have limited her ability to have more than 1 or 2 bedrooms in her house too, under the ADU.
That's right.
And at the end of the day, whether it's a house in an ADU or it's 2 houses on 2 lots, physically, if you walk out there and look at it, it looks exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's just ownership.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote. I think we'll do a roll call vote, Stephen.
This is a motion to approve with conditions. Gary,
Yes.
Goodrum,
No.
Paul,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Rollins,
Yes.
Rowland,
Yes.
Tucker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So now we'll address the text amendment.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll do text amendments. And you received these today by email. You've got a hard copy set in front of you. I'm just going to walk you through these. There's 6 of them. These are all addressing new state legislation that passed that changes requirements that we currently have laid out in our zoning ordinance, dealing primarily with the duration of time that a certain types of procedures have to be posted for public notice. So the first one is an amendment with respect to appeals. This is 948B. This deals with the public notification requirements for appeals of type 4 decisions. We don't get those a lot, but what that is if there is a variance that is acted on by the hearings board that is appealed, it comes to you as a type 3. We need to, the posting time periods of that has always been 15 days. And no more than 45. The state changed that to 30 days for that type of an action for posting, but no more than 45. We need to amend that time period. The next one is doing the same thing, dealing with type 4 notice. These are additional variances as well as appeals of my decisions as planning director that somebody wants to make to the hearings board. And there are 2 or 3 other things that will move within that, but same thing, just changing posting requirements from 15 days to 30 to bring us into compliance. The next 2 items are dealing, if we're changing, our submittal timelines are normally at 30 days prior to the next meeting. If we've got to post legal ads on day 30, then no later than that, we've got to back up the submittal times a little bit. So for both type 3 submittals, which is number 3, and number 4 is type 4 submittals, we're amending that the complete applications must be submitted at least 40 days prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting. It's going to require us to go in and amend our submittal deadlines, but these all go into effect July 1 regardless. So it's a requirement that we have to do this. Number 5 is the one that I'm going to hand off to our trusty attorney, Mr. Jackson, because I don't know a lot about this one either.
Yeah. No worries. So this one deals with certiorari documents. Basically, that refers to like appeal documents. The new legislation says that, if a decision by a board such as the hearing board or planning commission is appealed, that has to go to superior court by way of a petition for certiorari. What this ordinance does under the new legislation is we have to designate a certain person on the planning commission or hearings board who's authorized to accept those documents and sign off on them before the appeal can actually be filed. So that's essentially what this does.
Okay, thank you, Austin. And then the 6th item is an ordinance to amend it's basically the definition of family section as it appears in 915-18C with an exemption. This is dealing with what the state is defining as maternity supportive housing residences as defined in OCGA 49-5-3. Basically, if you qualify and are operating that use under that definition, you are not subject to the definition of family requirements of the local jurisdiction that you are in. So we needed to insert that exemption into our general regulations 915. Those are all 6, the amendments. I think it's completely fine if you're comfortable doing it, just dealing with all of them with one motion to forward to the commission for adoption. Motion to approve.
I never approve it.
So we'll make the motion over there.
Joey.
And Matt seconded.
I thirded it.
I was just curious, what is maternity supportive housing?
Thought you were going to ask, so I brought. As defined by the state, maternity supportive housing residence means a residential home that houses on behalf of a nonprofit organization up to 6 pregnant women aged 18 or older and their minor children at any one time during a woman's pregnancy and up to 18 months after childbirth, provided however that no medical services shall be provided. This term shall not include a child welfare agency as defined in section 49.512, the residential home of a relative in which a woman receives maternity care, or a general or special hospital.
Do we have anything like this that exists at Clarke?
Yes, on paper we do. There was remember the old People of Hope property up on Freeman that came in 2-3 years ago with the group that wanted to provide supportive housing for newly single moms that either were, that were currently pregnant or had just had babies and needed a place to go with some watchful oversight.
Specific.
Yes, they would have, because that was I think that was a PD, but if it would have been an RS property, they could have done that by right and not been subject to the definition of family.
And is that something just generally moving forward? Do we treat those like we would treat what we treated group, what do we call that? Group home?
Personal care home.
Personal care.
Personal care home. Do we, if that, like, is that something that has to be sort of officially?
A lot of that's going to depend on if it requires the same licensing out of the state, and I don't know that.
Yeah.
If it didn't, and it was just, it was somebody, a nonprofit that was opening up a house to provide housing for people that meet this qualification, I don't know that it would rise to the level of assisted living. If the state required it to be permitted that way, then it would still be a special use to get approved. But it's just the only thing that the state legislature was doing was saying you cannot regulate that under your definition of family ordinance.
I think we can just do a not roll call vote, whatever that's.
Yes.
So, all in favor, or do you want to restate the motion? We're going
Just a motion to approve all six.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, great. Okay, Brad, do you have a report for us?
I have a report from Tuesday night quickly. There were 5 items considered Tuesday night by our mayor and commission that came forward from this body. Olympic Drive was held. There was an introduction regarding a percentage of units that would be provided at 60% AMI or less. But we really didn't have any of that information, so the commission held it for a month in order to get additional information on their offer. Jennings Mill townhouse development was also held at the request of the applicant to continue to work through some potential conditions that may alleviate some concerns with the local commissioner. The rezoning of the property for the Clarke County School District on Hill and Prince was approved. The comprehensive plan amendment was approved, and so we're in a position now to send that forward for approval. And then the Newton Bridge Road DR Horton project withdrew. At the meeting, that withdrawal was accepted. It's my understanding that their intention is they're going to turn immediately around and bring it back through with a binding plan this time for your consideration. Although I would not expect that binding plan to change significantly from what you've looked at 2 or 3 times already. I don't think they're going to ask for an increase in density even though the commissioners kind of leaned the same way that you all did in terms of some additional housing options or types within the development, but they've given me no indication that they're going to make that change. You should get that at your July meeting.
You're gonna be out of town.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I would entertain a motion to.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stay for.
Yeah, kept an eye on it.
Well,
Yeah, I've made it does.
I think, here's what I think happened, at least in part. I think that your
What I couldn't lose.
history and knowledge and background of,
Yeah.
big study as public, yes, it is.
Yeah.